Zai Poo kicks off his latest stream, greeting millions of fans for another adventure. This time he's framing the journey as a serious scientific investigation. But the chat is already calling him out, convinced the background is just a cheap green screen. To prove the haters wrong, he starts adjusting the camera to show off his real surroundings. Just as he's about to fix the angle, a massive truck comes screaming out of the tunnel behind him. Millions of viewers watch in real time as the vehicle barrels toward him at full speed. Zai barely has a second to react before his phone and the world around him start to glitch. Instead of a fatal impact, a blinding surge of blue energy swallows everything in sight, and reality itself literally shatters like a broken mirror. He wakes up drifting in a digital void, watching his own body get reconstructed by glowing data. When he finally hits the ground, the high-tech interface is gone, replaced by a dark stone room. Seeing the truck's wreckage sitting right there makes it clear that physics has officially left the building. A glowing magic circle appears under him, confirming this definitely is not China anymore. The kid looks around and realizes he's trapped in a damp, medieval-style dungeon. Hearing the screams of other prisoners reaching out from their cells makes the situation sink in fast. Touching the mossy walls and feeling the damp air proves this is not some crazy VR simulation. These rusty bars are way too real, leaving him wondering if he got hit by a wormhole instead of a truck. And without a phone or any way to call for help, he's stuck waiting for answers. A massive shadow falls over his cell as a heavily armored guard approaches. This guy is genuinely surprised that the new kid is not paralyzed with fear like the rest of the inmates. A girl in a fancy dress appears, looking more like a cosplayer than a prisoner, and Zai finds her almost too perfect to be a real person. She's the one questioning why he isn't terrified yet, but instead of panicking, he asks what kind of crime landed her in here. The girl claims her sins were decided before she was even born, and while she's trying to be mysterious, the kid is just glad to have company. He even jokes that she's the one who should be worried about a stranger in her cell. This place is actually the death row of the royal capital, and things just got heavy. Apparently, she was trying to summon a demon for her final wish but got a science blogger instead. Hearing the words death row finally makes the gravity of the situation sink in, as they're both scheduled for a one-way trip to the execution grounds tomorrow morning. The plan is to burn them both at the stake in front of the whole kingdom. She offers to cancel the summon, but that would send him right back to the moment of the crash, and since he was mid-collision with a massive truck, that means instant death. Zai does the math and realizes he'd be scattered across the pavement in a second. This is not some elaborate escape room, it's a literal life or death situation. The girl asks one more time if he is finally feeling the pressure, but he repeats that the unknown is the only thing worth fearing. And as a massive fan of prison break stories, he is actually in his element. With his scientific knowledge, he claims escaping this dungeon will be a total breeze. The girl cannot wrap her head around what she is seeing, watching as Zai starts messing with the bars of their cell. Her first thought is that he is using some kind of fire magic, but in this world, men are not even supposed to be capable of using it. Zai shuts that down immediately, calling magic way too fantastical, and introduces her to the concept of science instead. She is baffled because she cannot feel any magic fluctuations at all, yet this guy is breaking through anti-magic metal with just a few cans and a knife. He asks if she has ever heard of a thermite reaction, but since she is stuck in a fantasy setting, she obviously has no clue what that is. Zai tells her she is in for a treat as he prepares the mixture, explaining the specific ratio of aluminum and iron oxide needed for the job. He flicks a lighter, ready to generate over 2,000 degrees of heat, and the metal chains melt like butter under the intense chemical reaction. The girl stares at the result of this power of science, realizing he is doing the impossible without a single drop of mana. With the way now clear, he reaches out and tells her it is time to go, but the girl does not immediately move to follow him, even though the path to freedom is wide open. She drops a bombshell and admits that she is actually guilty. Zai brushes off her confession, telling her there's no such thing as being born guilty, and drags her along while dismissing her talk of bad luck as unscientific nonsense. Finally breaking her silence, the girl introduces herself as Rena, and he returns the favor, officially giving her his name, Zai. The quiet escape does not last long before guards realize the cell is empty, forcing them to move before the backup arrives to block the exit. The guards start panicking when they realize it's the Calamity Demon herself escaping, but instead of running, Rena starts drawing on a massive reserve of power. She triggers a teleportation spell that catches Zai completely off guard, and the sudden shift in space sends a massive jolt through his system. They reappear thousands of feet in the air, high above the glowing city. And Rena tells him to hold on tight as they start plummeting toward the earth. Her magical energy starts flickering out at the worst possible moment, and with her mana completely drained, they lose their flight and fall into the trees. They crash through the forest canopy, with branches breaking their lethal descent before hitting the forest floor in a chaotic tangle of limbs and leaves. Zai groans as he tries to process that they actually survived the drop, and looks up to find Rena staring directly into his eyes. She's pinned him down, her face inches away as the dust finally settles, and she keeps her gaze locked on him with a look that's hard to read. Rena checks to see if he is injured after that rough landing, but Zai brushes it off. She gives him a long look as they finally catch their breath in the quiet forest. They've landed in a graveyard on a hillside within the city limits, luckily avoiding a public scene. Zai asks what the plan is now that they've successfully broken out of prison. Renaa stares at a nearby headstone and says she just wants to go home. Zaipu starts to think about his own path before she stops him in his tracks, citing a management ordinance that says summoned beasts have to be leashed and muzzled by their masters. The realization hits him that he's the beast in this scenario, which makes him think she's lost it. Renaa explains their souls are linked, meaning if she dies, his life ends right along with hers. That news sends him into a total spiral as he realizes his survival depends entirely on her safety. She warns him that since her mana is gone, they'll both be captured and likely killed very soon. Zaipu is not about to let that happen and suddenly grabs her by the arm, promising that since their lives are tied, he'll do whatever it takes to keep her safe. Even though the city gates are crawling with guards, he's determined to get her back home. Zaipu picks her up and makes a run for it, deciding to infiltrate the city together. They manage to sneak into the town, which looks like a typical medieval fantasy setting, but he notices immediately that all the soldiers and guards are women and magic is strictly banned. The men are relegated to hauling crates and doing all the heavy lifting in the streets. And Renaa explains that in this world, only women can use magic, so they hold all the power. Zaipu realizes that on top of being a summoned beast, he's at the bottom of the social ladder. A couple of workers accidentally dump a dead wolf's carcass, spilling a bucket of nasty liquid right in front of the pair. The stuff is so corrosive it starts eating through the metal bucket on the spot. While the laborers wonder where this kid came from, Renaa identifies the slime as shadow wolf saliva. Renaa explains it's highly dangerous, but Zaipu realizes that if it can melt metal, it's basically concentrated acid. Instead of backing away, the kid gets a closer look despite the risk of getting burned. His modern chemistry knowledge kicks in as he realizes the saliva is basically pure sulfuric acid. The locals think he's lost his mind as he starts poking around the mess, but he just grabs a spare animal bladder and runs off before they can stop him. They reach the main gate only to find it is way too heavily guarded for a stealthy exit. Since they cannot fight through, science becomes the weapon of choice as he mixes the acid with magnesium. The chemical reaction starts bubbling away, producing a massive amount of highly flammable hydrogen gas. The stench is unbearable, but the process needs to be finished before they are spotted. Using torn fabric as a fuse, he turns the inflated animal bladder into a literal hydrogen bomb. They find a high vantage point overlooking the guards where they will not be seen. Renaa watches in confusion as her protector pulls out a lighter to set the whole thing off. A single spark is all it takes for the gas to ignite and create a massive distraction. A deafening blast rocks the entire street, sending a shockwave through the town. People start screaming in panic as the explosion tears through the quiet atmosphere. The guards on the walls are convinced the Calamity Witch is launching a magic attack on the city. With the soldiers rushing to provide backup at the blast site, the path to the gate finally opens up. Zaipu makes a run for it with Renaa tucked under his cloak, officially calling an end to the day's explosive science lesson. Renaa looks back at the city, finally feeling like they might actually make it home, while quietly admiring the power of the beast she summoned. She is feeling safer than ever until she notices a strange scent clinging to him, just as Lady Zia arrives at the blast site to investigate the noise. It does not take long for the commander to realize Renaa is behind this chaos, and she is immediately fascinated by the powerful new summon that caused it. Surrounded by her demon hounds, she decides she's going to steal him for herself. The hounds pick up a scent leading straight to a nearby cave. And the soldiers rush in thinking they have finally cornered their targets. Lady Zia watches from the entrance, waiting for the inevitable capture, but her entire squad is immediately hit with a face full of pepper and starts sneezing uncontrollably. Miles away from the trap, the duo finally reaches the safety of the forest, where Zaipu reveals he used the hound's own super-sensitive noses against them. He knew a bit of black pepper would be enough to throw the entire search party off. Though Renaa is currently more focused on how he smells after the explosion. A quick sniff confirms that the science experiment left a lingering mark, but she points out that he smells too, making him realize he desperately needs a bath, which leads to a very awkward moment when her skirt suddenly starts sliding off. Renaa takes things way too literally and forcefully strips him to help him clean up, conjuring a massive orb of water to power wash him while he is still processing the nudity. This leaves him completely drained and questioning her methods once the ordeal is finally over, forcing Zaipu to set some serious boundaries about using magic for personal hygiene. He's mostly worried about the public exposure, thinking his account would get banned for this, while she just does not understand why he is upset about getting exactly what he asked for. To smooth things over, she suggests heading to a village she remembers for being warm and full of life. They hike over to the settlement, but the lively atmosphere she promised is nowhere to be found. The place looks like a ghost town that has seen much better days, and the only thing actually moving is a crowd gathered around a dried-up well. Instead of a warm welcome, they find the locals fighting each other for a single drop of water. Renaa is genuinely confused about how her memories of a thriving town turned into this wasteland. But Zaipu realizes they have the perfect solution literally standing right next to him. He tells her to use that same water magic she used on him to help these people out, and she wastes no time gathering her energy to fix the drought. The villagers stop their fighting as they notice a strange presence nearby, watching in awe as a massive sphere of water forms out of thin air. She dumps the entire supply straight into the well with one massive blast, sending fresh water surging back to the surface for the first time in ages. Now that they have seen a miracle, the locals drop to their knees to beg the witch for salvation. Looking at the dried-up wells and withered farmland, it's clear these people were down to fighting over mud just to survive. Zaipu realizes the situation is even more dire than it looks, and a local kid asks if Rena is the savior the village chief sent for. Apparently, the chief vanished and left the men to fend for themselves, though the kid does not buy that she just abandoned her post. He's so impressed by the miracle that he wants to grow up and be Rena's servant, but she corrects him by saying Bro is actually her summoned beast. She doubles down on the title with total confidence, treating him like a pet while he tries to explain the biological definition of a human being. The peace does not last long before another villager comes running, begging for help with his family's situation. Rena starts to look pretty rough as the pressure builds, and she finally hits her limit, collapsing from total mana exhaustion. Zaipu catches her before she hits the ground, and even though she tries to force herself to keep going, he stops her right there. He tells the witch it's time to call it a day and get some actual rest, after carrying her back to bed. He makes sure she's tucked in so she stops trying to carry the whole village on her shoulders. Looking at the wasteland outside, he knows they need a permanent fix that does not involve her passing out again. Zaipu finally reveals his low-tech fix for the drought, leaving the locals stunned as they find barrels full of fresh water. Since creating water is usually a skill reserved for powerful witches, the villagers struggle to process a man doing the impossible. Our hero introduces them to the revolutionary concept of science, gesturing toward the simple mesh net he constructed overnight. This fog net traps moisture directly from the morning air, turning vapor into droplets that slowly but surely fill the barrels. While one net will not save the entire village just yet, building a few more means their water shortage is officially over. The men realize they can finally provide for their own families, concluding that science is basically just magic that guys can use. Zaipu leans into the genius persona to keep things moving, letting the kid believe he is some kind of high-level modern wizard. The boy is officially a fan, even if he still insists on the beast label, and soon the whole town starts chanting in favor of their new science. Rena decides to reward her favorite summoned beast with a head pat, which immediately sparks another round of Zaipu's not a pet protests. She insists this is just how a proper master shows their appreciation, leaving him stuck with his new reputation and a very confused kid. The local soldiers are on high alert, hunting for someone they call the Calamity Witch. It makes the villagers wonder if the drought was a curse, especially since Zaipu's tech works without magic. Lady Zia watches from the sidelines, completely obsessed with the idea of claiming Rena's summoned beast. And with the water supply secured, she orders her squad to move out and capture their target. Moving to the outskirts of Caroline City, the situation looks even more desperate than the village. Profiteers are taking advantage of the drought by selling tiny sips of water for a month's wages. A starving father begs for a drink, only to get tossed aside when he cannot pay the insane markup. Zaipu cannot believe the local government is letting these scammers run wild in the streets. Rena decides to take matters into her own hands by manifesting a sphere of pure water. She starts handing out free drinks to the people who were just being extorted by the merchants. Word spreads instantly, and a massive crowd gathers for the first free resource they have seen in weeks. The greedy water merchant sees his business model collapsing in real time and loses his mind. He kicks the bucket right out of Rena's hands, sending the water flying. This guy does not care where she is from, he just wants the competition gone. Pulling out a license, he claims his group has the exclusive legal right to distribute water here. Rena tries to explain that she is not even selling it, just trying to help. But the merchant is not interested in charity or logic, explaining that giving it away for free is actually a bigger crime in his book. Cutting into their profits is basically a death sentence, and he is sure the local lord will agree. The merchant gives her one final warning to back off before his guards get involved. The merchant doubles down on his threats, claiming the lord will back him up even if things turn violent, but the crowd suddenly parts for the actual authority in the city. This guy thinks his savior has arrived when Lady Ruby finally shows up with her personal guard. He immediately tries to frame Rena as a market disruptor who's ruining the economy and attacking their mages. Ruby does not say a word as she takes in the scene, and then she shuts the merchant up with a strike that sends him spinning across the street. Instead of arresting the troublemakers, she drops to the ground and offers her respects to Zaipu. The sudden shift in power leaves the kid completely blindsided, especially since he just found out this girl is actually the lord of the entire city. Things move fast after that, and the group is brought straight to the main palace. Zaipu barely has time to process his new status before a maid walks in on him in the bath. She's not there for a cleaning service though, she's got a tape measure and a list of requirements. Confusion sets in as he realizes she needs his physical dimensions for a very specific reason. Apparently, since the Lord brought him in, he's being measured for a potential spot in the royal harem. Bro starts scrambling to the other side of the tub to get away, begging the maid to keep her distance while he tries to maintain some shred of dignity. Eventually, he convinces her to let him handle the actual measuring himself, but she warns him that the council will know if he tries to fake any of the data. Left alone, he reflects on how he went from hunting a witch to becoming a potential royal consort. It is a weird contrast to the drought outside, but he has got much bigger problems to worry about now. Zaipu finishes up in the tub, thinking about how clueless nobles usually are when it comes to real suffering. After getting dressed in his new royal gear, he wonders if the Lord might actually be different from the rest. Seeking out some answers, he walks straight into the middle of a tense standoff in the main office. A council advisor is currently breathing down Ruby's neck, demanding to know why she's even in this territory. Apparently, there was a strict deal made with the Witch Management Association regarding her age and magic control. Listening from the side, Zaipu realizes they're basically treating her like a dangerous criminal. The advisor is not interested in excuses and orders her to leave for the royal capital by tomorrow morning. Ruby surprisingly agrees to go, but she's not finished making her own demands just yet. Zaipu knows that sending her back now is basically a death sentence for her freedom and safety. Refusing to just stand there, he steps into the room to put a stop to the one-sided conversation. He calls the advisor out for caring more about politics than the actual lives of the citizens. The situation escalates as he asks if they even care if Ruby ends up being sent to the stake. Ruby stands her ground, stating she'll only leave after fixing the drought and visiting her mother's grave. This does not sit well with the advisor, who clearly views the commoners as a secondary concern. She argues that using high-level magic for rain would weaken their military and deplete their combat strength. Even with the pressure, Ruby insists her mother would have prioritized the people over power, and she refuses to abandon the very territory her mother worked so hard to protect. The advisor keeps making excuses, claiming that mobilizing witches from other regions would only cause more chaos. Zaipu finally loses it and laughs, finding the logic behind their excuses completely ridiculous. He points out the massive hypocrisy of keeping the palace baths full while the rest of the city dies of thirst. The advisor tries to brush off the commoners' suffering as just being their destiny, but Rena is not buying that heartless excuse for a second. She's willing to burn through every drop of her mana just to give these people a chance at survival, basically deciding to rewrite that supposed destiny herself. This hits a nerve with the advisor, who slams the desk in frustration at the girl's defiance. She warns Rena to stop being so stubborn and follow the royal orders. But the pressure is not enough to make the princess back down. Zaipu jumps back in to steer the conversation, asking if her magic can handle both ice and wind. Since wind witches are common but ice users are rare, she is actually a uniquely powerful asset. He correctly guesses the advisor's real fear, that pulling water witches from the borders leaves the kingdom open to attack. Even though she agrees with his logic, the advisor still thinks he's just an outsider overstepping his bounds. She remains strictly by the book, refusing to move an inch on the established rules. So Zaipu drops his big plan, claiming they do not need water witches if they use wind, ice, and a little bit of science. Rena is shocked that a concept like science could actually end a massive drought, but he's dead serious about his knowledge being the missing piece of the puzzle. The advisor just scoffs at the idea, calling it a tall tale meant to trick them. Word reaches the room that a high-ranking lord has unexpectedly returned from the capital. A new player enters the hall, accompanied by a man being led in chains. This is Merida, the vice president of the influential Fano Merchant Guild, and her sudden arrival is about to throw a massive wrench into the council's plans. Merida steps forward with a formal apology on her lips, representing the powerful Fano Chamber of Commerce as their vice president. Bringing along a merchant who supposedly needs to atone for a major mistake, the man presents a permit while offering a very public show of regret. The real catch is his threat to pull all water witches and stop sales immediately, leaving Riene in a difficult spot as the guild pushes its weight around. Zaipu sees right through the act, realizing this apology is actually a staged shakedown. By pretending to be sorry, they're holding the territory's water supply hostage for better terms. The merchant plays the victim, begging to keep the witches in place to avoid looking like the villain. This calculated pressure puts the local leadership in a corner, and Merida takes the hesitant silence as a win to keep the permit on the table. She then pivots to the next phase, suggesting the merchant must be punished for his error. The advisor finally snaps, ordering the guild to stop the games and leave the witches alone. Neither side is backing down as the political maneuvering gets aggressive, but Zaipu interrupts to mention his plan for solving the drought with wind and ice. Merida drops a bombshell by revealing her guild owns the only high-ranking ice witch nearby. She offers to lend their top-tier specialists for free to help the territory recover, which sounds like a perfect deal until the hidden cost comes to light. The guild wants total control over pricing for all future trade in the region in exchange. But the advisor slams the idea down, calling the scientific plan a total fantasy. Riene takes the lead and agrees to the proposal, allowing Merida to maintain her benevolent merchant act while setting up a new workshop. Internally, the guild leader is just waiting for the territory to fail so she can demand even more power later. Merida warns the group to hurry up before she makes her exit, but not before dropping a cryptic hint about a lady named Zia who's hunting for Riene. This mysterious noble is already digging into the past back at the witch's hometown, and while Zaipu is eager to start the experiment, Riene pulls him back for a quick lesson. He needs a crash course on witch fundamentals before they start messing with elements, especially since he does not understand why most people are limited to just one magic type. Riene explains the 9 ranks of power that determine a witch's ceiling and potential, eventually leading the way to the alchemy workshop to put their theories to the test. They head inside the lab to see if magic can actually solve a modern industrial problem, and while most casters are locked into one element for their entire lives, Riene shocks him by revealing she's mastered 5 different types, with ice being her only blind spot. She's actually a ninth rank witch, which is basically the equivalent of being a max level player. This explains the massive power, even if her mana efficiency is so bad she passes out after one cast. Zaipu shifts his focus to the nitrogen-producing machine he needs to solve the drought, asking the high-rank genius to help stabilize the fire magic for his new invention. They work in sync to manage the energy flow without blowing the whole lab apart, and the machine finally starts humming to life as he reminds her to pace herself. Riene insists she's got this despite her mana being dangerously low, and Zaipu is finally starting to see how magic can actually be efficient for his tech. He gives the little genius a head pat as a reward for her hard work, treating the legendary ninth-rank witch like a helpful puppy. She's not exactly used to being handled like this, but the machine is officially ready. Now the only missing pieces for the liquid nitrogen plan are the final two specialists. Right on cue, two new witches sent by Lady Melida arrive at the lab to report for duty. There's Floro, a wind specialist who looks half asleep, and Jinli's a serious ice witch. Zaipu introduces Riene as his partner, though she's quick to remind him she is not his pet. The newcomers are immediately confused about the hierarchy here since they were expecting to follow a legendary witch, not some random guy without a drop of mana. He does not waste any time trying to win them over with personality, though. The plan is to use wind magic for compression and ice for cooling to trigger the artificial rain. Floro thinks the idea of solving a massive drought with a single machine is a total joke, calling his invention a pile of fancy junk that does not even look like a real magic tool. They're convinced he's just a fraud looking for an easy payday while they do all the heavy lifting. Zaipu pulls out a barometer to explain how he'll be measuring the pressure levels, but the witches think using a physical needle to see what they can already feel is just plain stupid. Regardless of their attitude, he orders Floro to start pumping wind into the container, and she reluctantly begins the first stage of the experiment. Zaipu lays out the goal for the first stage of the experiment, telling Floro she can take a break as soon as the pressure needle hits 15. This fires her up enough to dump every bit of her mana into the machine. The gauge starts climbing, but it's moving a lot slower than expected. It barely passes the 4 mark before the momentum completely dies out, and even though he tells her to keep pushing until the target, the girl collapses from exhaustion after barely making a dent in the tank. Zaipu is honestly disappointed that a 4th rank witch has such low output, which sends Floro into a defensive rant about her elite status. She claims the machine is just a piece of junk designed to make her look bad, but the needle suddenly spikes well past the original goal. Riene steps up to show off what actual high-tier wind magic looks like, leaving the kid stunned by how much power she's actually packing. She casually mentions that wind is just one of the 5 elements she has mastered, which is a massive reality check for the 2 new recruits. Flora is left sulking over the fact that her best effort was basically a warm-up for Riene. Now that the pressure is right, the machine finally starts producing nitrogen gas. He carefully transfers the harvest into a specialized storage container, then calls on Jinli's to start the second phase of the process. The plan is to use ice magic to hit negative 195 degrees and create the liquid nitrogen needed for the rain. Zaipu hands over the tank and tells Jinli's the next step is freezing the nitrogen inside, while the girls whisper about whether Riene is just trying to drain their mana for fun. Jinli's decides she wants to help end the drought since this is her first real job and starts channeling her magic with total determination to give it her all, but the sudden pressure of professional work proves to be way too much for her. This leaves the kid wondering if a 4th rank which even has the output needed for liquid nitrogen, though Jinli's keeps trying to psych herself up by shouting that she can do it. Seconds later, the confidence vanishes and she admits that it might actually be impossible, spiraling into a loop of total indecision until Floro blames him for breaking her friend's spirit. The duo decides to call it a day and heads back to the village for some rest. Watching them leave through the shop door, he's left alone to process the sudden exit. He takes a breather and grabs a drink while reflecting on how the experiment stalled out. Riene drops by to thank him for the hard work, but he is not feeling particularly proud. He points out that he only provided the theory while the girls did all the heavy lifting, so Riene gives him a head pat to remind him that upsetting strangers is perfectly normal. While tidying up the lab, he realizes the girl with glasses accidentally left her magic book behind. Flipping through the pages reveals that the essence of her ice magic is actually much deeper, focusing more on the deconstruction and reconstruction of matter than just simple freezing. This discovery clicks in his mind just as he is finishing off his glass of water, and he suddenly calls out to Riene with a brand new plan to finish the project. Riene realizes she's using the same glass Zaipu just drank from, while he shows off the 4 new machines he needs the witches to power up. She tries to give him some credit for the design work, but he's quick to point out that her magic did all the actual heavy lifting. Floro and Jinli's eventually drag themselves back into the lab looking completely drained, so he wastes no time telling Jinli's he found a way to simplify the nitrogen process. The suggestion does not go over well with the tired duo, and Jinli's gets defensive about a non-mage trying to lecture her on her own specialty. Since they think it's impossible for a human to understand magic that even Riene struggles with, he drops a bombshell by claiming he can perform ice magic himself. The girls cannot sense any mana at all and assume he's just making things up, but he tells them to pay attention if they want to witness a miracle. Preparing a large pot of water on the table, He places a smaller can inside to begin the demonstration. He explains that he's using saltpeter he scraped off old walls and purified earlier, and the room temperature starts dropping fast enough to make the girls shiver. It turns out saltpeter absorbs heat the second it touches water, allowing him to suck the energy right out of the inner container. He pulls out a fresh chunk of ice to prove it is the real deal, showing the shocked witches that magic is just a fancy way of manipulating heat. Zaipu hands over a chunk of ice to help Jinli's get a physical feel for the theory, and she starts realizing that magic is just a tool for heat absorption and release. The pink-haired spirit tries to get in on the action with a weird new nickname for him, but he stays focused on the lesson, pointing out that her current ice magic is too limited. He explains that the true essence of her power is forcing objects to dump their heat, so he tells her to stop looking at the air as empty space. The goal is to focus specifically on the nitrogen gas surrounding them, and Jinli's pushes her magic to drop the temperature of those molecules as fast as possible. It works perfectly, marking the first time she's manipulated matter on this level, and the breakthrough proves that his scientific approach is the key to unlocking her potential. Seeing the success, the little spirit girl starts acting extra cute to get her own training session, practically begging him to guide her so she can be just as useful as the others. Zaipu lays out the master plan to create massive amounts of liquid nitrogen to trigger artificial rain, and Riene offers to use her teleportation magic to deliver the payload into the clouds. He shuts that down immediately, telling her that her mana and health are already hitting their limits. There is no point in a delivery system if the pilot collapses before the mission even starts. But Riene is determined to follow her mother's footsteps and save the territory no matter the cost. He insists that avoiding mistakes is more important than being a martyr right now, especially since her teleportation is the most mana-intensive part of the entire operation. She finally listens to reason and agrees to rest, realizing they need her at full strength for the final move. Riene passes out right there on the roof, leaving the guy no choice but to handle the heavy lifting. He carries her back to her room so she can actually recover, and tries to tuck her in without waking her up. Before he can slip away, she grabs hold of him and begs him to stay, showing a vulnerable side he definitely was not expecting. He's stuck in a pretty awkward spot when her grip does not loosen, making him realize there's a lot more going on under her cold exterior. She starts calling out for her mother in her sleep, leaving him confused about what she's been through. The peaceful moment gets wrecked when a guard bursts through the door, reporting that a massive wave of refugees is currently storming the castle. They're desperate for water and looking for someone to blame, and the mob has decided that Riene's return is the reason for the drought. The crowd is calling her a witch and demanding she be kicked out of the territory, which forces the two of them to see the scale of the chaos outside. This backlash hits a nerve, bringing up old memories of the curse she's carried, reminding her of the magic that's always been treated like a disaster. It's the same nightmare she's been living since she was a kid, being blamed for every misfortune just for existing in her own home. Zaipu hits Riene with a reality check about how science works, insisting she's the solution to this drought rather than the cause. Riene still feels like she's born with a target on her back, but he's not hearing it. Outside, the starving refugees are currently trying to tear the gate off its hinges. Guards scramble to defend the entrance as the mob starts lighting torches, while the captain warns that trespassing is a one-way ticket to an execution. The threat falls flat since these people feel like they're already dead anyway, and the skirmish quickly turns into a desperate brawl against the knights. The iron bars do not hold for long against that much pure desperation, and the courtyard gets swarmed by rioters looking for anyone to kill. Things are about to turn into a bloodbath until the main duo finally arrives. Zaipu orders the soldiers to stand down and avoid hurting the civilians, but the sight of Riene just makes the crowd scream for her head. They blame her return for every drop of water that's disappeared, and someone actually hurls a rock that Zaipu has to block with his body. He catches the hit to protect her while the crowd keeps chanting insults, bringing up every old tragedy and blaming her for things she could not control. The entire group starts demanding she leave the territory immediately, but Zaipu finally snaps and roars at everyone to stand down, and the sheer pressure of his voice actually manages to kill the noise. Zaipu stakes his reputation on a single promise that it'll rain by tomorrow morning, warning the rioters that any more hands laid on the Lord will trigger a judgment call. He uses their own torches to make a point about how quickly hope can turn into a literal fire, but the crowd is not buying a lecture from a guy they think has zero magic power. They start pelting him with stones again while calling out his bullshit weather report, until Riene finally makes her grand entrance from above to silence the chaos. She doubles down on the bet, telling the mob they can burn both her and Zaipu at the stake if it does not rain. The sheer weight of that life-or-death wager actually manages to stun the crowd into silence. Zaipu's real plan involves teleporting 5 bottles of liquid nitrogen into the atmosphere, a feat of magic so taxing that only a genius like Riene could handle the power load. Just as they're about to start the ritual, an 8th-rank witch named Zia interrupts from the rooftops. Riene immediately recognizes her as a messenger sent to drag her back home by force. Zia confirms the kidnapping mission with a smile that does not match the threat, and she makes it clear that a refusal will have very messy consequences for everyone else. She starts torching the surroundings, promising to turn everything Riene relies on into a pile of ash. It is a blatant ultimatum to abandon the town or watch the entire courtyard burn with her friends inside. Zaipu panics as the heat gets close to the nitrogen canisters, since high heat will turn them into bombs. One of the subordinates tries to blow the flames away with a wind spell, but the high-level fire just consumes the magic and knocks her back instantly. Riene realizes that normal spells are useless, and only her own water magic can stop an 8th rank witch. Riene is ready to counter the fire, but using her water magic now comes with a massive trade-off. If she burns her mana to stop the flames, the rain ritual is dead before it even starts. Zia does not give her a second to think, warning her that any resistance will only make the situation worse. The witch begins torching the entire area, spreading the heat until it becomes unbearable for everyone on the ground. On top of the fire, the magic holding the liquid nitrogen canisters stable is finally hitting its limit. Looking out at the chaos, Riene realizes the situation has spiraled completely out of her control. The mob is so blinded by rage they actually think the fire is a fake stage effect meant to scare them off. Zia answers that doubt by turning the townspeople into human torches to prove she is not bluffing. She offers a final ultimatum, asking Riene to choose between her own safety and the lives of those who hate her, framing it as a choice to either leave them to their fate or return to the coven, while reaching out a hand to seal the deal right then and there. Riene looks at the suffering crowd and realizes they're only acting this way because they are scared and hurt, and remembers her duty as the future lord of this territory, not a bringer of calamity. To save the town from being erased, she finally agrees to go back with Zia, but she makes it clear that she is not just surrendering to a predetermined destiny. She is going to be the one who rewrites the fate of these people herself. Even as she takes the witch's hand, her resolve to protect the town has not wavered, knowing that if she walks away now, the cycle of ignorance and hate will never end. The crowd is still completely oblivious to the fact that they are being saved by the person they were trying to kill. Just as Riene is about to leave, Zaipu steps directly into the fire, determined to put the flames out himself. Zia laughs off the attempt, basically telling Bro to go ahead and try, challenging him to actually change what she calls Riene's predetermined fate. Zaipu reminds Jinli that ice magic is about heat absorption, not just making blocks, and tells Floro to use wind magic to create a vacuum and suffocate the flames. It's a high-stakes play, and he orders the girls to move right now before it is too late. Floro jumps in, swearing she will haunt him forever if this backfires, and kills them all. The team syncs up their magic just as the witches are about to teleport away. And a massive shockwave hits as they combine their elements to kill the fire. The 8th rank flames are literally sucked out of existence in a massive blast of wind. Zia cannot believe her eyes because putting out this fire should have been impossible for them. Even Jinli is stunned that they actually managed to extinguish an 8th rank witch's fire. Zaipu pushes through the fading light to reach Riene before the moment passes. And she looks at him like she's finally seeing a way out of her cycle of misery. He tells her this is the proof she needs to show the world she is not some curse. The magic tools drop as the pressure finally lets up on the town and the people, and Riene realizes she can finally clear her name and honor her mother's memory. A pillar of pure energy shoots into the sky, signaling that the threat has been neutralized. The gauge finally hits the limit, confirming that the danger is officially over for everyone. Rain starts to fall as Riene realizes the impossible just happened thanks to his plan. She pulls him into a hug, calling him her summoned beast and finally letting her guard down. Zaipu asks Riene to call him something other than just his title, and she holds on tight while the rain continues to wash away the heat. The local people finally realize that the downpour is a blessing rather than a curse. Instead of the Witch of Calamity, they start calling her the Witch of Hope. By the next morning, another massive crowd of refugees gathers at the castle gates. Zaipu is confused why they are back since the drought was technically solved. The group heads outside to see if another protest is breaking out, but the crowd is actually there to cheer and give thanks to Lady Rena. She stands there in total shock at the sudden shift in public opinion. A young boy steps forward to apologize for throwing stones at her before, offering a bouquet of flowers as a sign of the town's new gratitude. Riene accepts the gift as her magic begins to sprout flowers all over the plaza. The celebration is interrupted when a messenger from the Fano Guild pushes through. This representative brings an official invitation for a meeting with President Merida. Caroline finds it incredibly rude for the guild to demand a visit instead of coming themselves. Zaipu takes the letter to see what the Merchant Guild is actually plotting. Merida originally wanted total control over guild pricing during the water crisis, but since the drought is over, he figures it is time to settle things in person. They arrive at the meeting spot to find the president waiting for them, and Merida greets them with a smile that feels a little too perfect to be trusted. Zaipu starts the meeting by acknowledging Merida wants to commercialize the rain tech. He gets straight to the point, asking exactly what she's willing to pay for it. Merida is impressed by how quickly he moves and invites the group to sit down. She brings out a treasure chest, claiming that simple gold would not be enough for this invention. The conversation shifts to Riene's dark history and the looming threat of the Witch Management Association. Since their lives are linked, Merida points out that if Riene is executed, Zaipu goes down too. She offers him a way out by revealing a method to dissolve their soul contract, and presents a legendary item called the Demon-Breaking Blade as the key. Zaipu realizes this is his chance to untether his life from Riene's dangerous situation. Riene is quiet, knowing that breaking the bond means he might return to where he came from, He remembers that before being summoned, he was basically just a pile of meat chunks. Merida clarifies the blade only cuts the bond, meaning he can stay in this world as a free man. This offer catches him off guard as the weight of the choice settles in. Riene realizes that while she would lose her connection to him, he would finally be safe from sharing her inevitable fate. Despite the benefits, the thought of him being free clearly weighs on her. She reaches out to hold on to him one last time before the decision is made. Zaipu decides he needs to hear the full terms in private and asks to speak with Merida alone. Outside the room, Caroline watches the city from the balcony, confirming that the rain was real and that this summoned beast is far more valuable than they thought. Merida finds Riene's special status more annoying than anything else, and points out that this whole situation could have been avoided with a little cooperation. Since Riene refused to come quietly, the Witch of Judgment is officially on the move. Hearing the name Evelyn hits different since that was Riene's former teacher. The weight of the council's decision is finally starting to land. Merida explains that Evelyn has zero mercy for heretics, especially those branded as calamity witches. Riene tries to deny the title, clinging to the idea that she's still herself, clinging to Zai Pu's defense of her as proof that she is not a monster. But that connection just gives Merida a new way to twist the knife. The senior witch asks if Riene could really face her summoned beast, if he found out the full extent of what she's actually done. That question hits a nerve, bringing back the destruction she's caused, and making it harder for her to claim she is truly innocent. Later, as they walk through the city together, Riene stays completely silent while the threat of her teacher's arrival looms. The threat of that impending judgment is all she can think about. Zaipu notices the shift and realizes Merida's words got under her skin. Instead of letting her spiral, he tries to pull her back to reality, grabbing her hand and telling her there's a specific place they need to go. Zaipu leads Riene to the one place she needed to visit before facing her teacher, the grave of her mother, who gave everything to protect this kingdom while the people suffered. Looking at the headstone, Riene realizes she never actually thanked him for everything he's done, not just for saving her people, but for saving her from herself when she had nothing left. Being able to stand here and face her mother again is a closure she did not think she'd get, and she promises her mom that as long as he's by her side, Caroline will finally be safe. Zaipu cuts through the heavy atmosphere before she can get too lost in her own head, reminding her that her deal with Merida only works if she actually stays alive. She decides she wants to end their formal contract so she can protect him of her own free will, vowing that she will not let anything happen to the person who gave her a second chance. She suddenly pulls him into a hug, catching him completely off guard as she lets go of her burden. It's a quiet moment of genuine connection amidst the chaos of the impending judgment. And even though he is flustered, Zaipu makes it clear that he truly believes in her. He tries to keep things light to help her relax, calling her his future rich benefactor while she finally finds some peace in his arms. The locals are already starting to gossip about the Lord and his summoned beast getting cozy, but Riene has already passed out from the emotional exhaustion of the day. The tender moment gets cut short when Merida and her associate track them down, demanding to know why they're out here having a heart-to-heart when the council is closing in. Now Zaipu has to explain why he's acting as a human pillow in the middle of a graveyard. Merida and Floro drop a bombshell by announcing they've officially quit the Fano Chamber of Commerce, which sends Zaipu into a panic as he mentions the liquid nitrogen project to get them to stay. They reveal they're actually loaded and just want to dodge the corporate rat race, leaving him momentarily worried about where he's going to find replacement witches. But the twist is that they only left the chamber so they could work for him exclusively. There is a catch, though, as they refuse to work for free, insisting on paying him a monthly fee just to keep their spots in his group. All they want in return is for him to help them level up their magical abilities, pulling an ultimate Uno reverse where the employees are the ones paying the boss. He turns down the gold to keep the relationship professional, reminding them that the drought is not over and he still needs their free labor. The girls are more than happy to double down on their efforts, especially once he mentions a way to keep the rain coming without needing Riene's magic. Meanwhile, the heavy hitters from the council finally make their appearance at the capital, bringing along the battle witch Tilem and the Witch of Judgment, Evelyn. The crowd gathers to witness the arrival of the goddess of war, Princess Zia, who steps up to greet her old teacher despite the pressure of the mission. Evelyn notes that even a princess as capable as her student failed to arrest Riene, but Zia explains that Riene is now a local hero after ending the drought. Since the public sees her as a savior, the council realizes they cannot just take her by force. Evelyn admits that since Riene brought the rain, the Witch of Calamity label will not stick anymore. The plan shifts to branding her a heretic to satisfy the public's need for a villain, leaving Zia with no choice but to hand the entire operation over to her teacher. This transition of power puts Riene's fate directly in the hands of the council's top enforcers. Meanwhile, Merida and Floro are busy soaking up the credit for the rain back at the manor. But the celebration is cut short when a messenger summons Riene to the audience hall. Zaipu grabs a copy of the imperial law, making sure he's prepared for whatever legal trap they've set. He walks in with Riene, knowing that their luck is about to be put to the ultimate test. The grand hall is packed with onlookers waiting to see how the power dynamic shifts. Ruby steps forward to initiate the formal proceedings, welcoming Riene into the center of the court. The kid gives her one last nod of encouragement as she prepares to take her rightful place. The atmosphere changes as Ruby officially recognizes Riene as the true lord of the territory, and the rest of the court follows suit, offering their greetings to their new leader. It's time to return the Lord's Seal, the ultimate symbol of authority that Princess Xena was guarding. Riene stares at the artifact, realizing the weight of the responsibility she's about to inherit. She takes the seal, finally completing the transfer of power and solidifying her status. This move is a massive strategic play because a recognized lord has specific legal protections, meaning the council can no longer drag her away on trumped-up charges without a formal trial. Even with the law on their side, the protagonist knows the danger has not passed just yet. He makes a silent vow to protect her even if their original contract ends, refusing to let her die. Zaipu feels confident about the rainfall method he passed on to the local team, and with the seal finally in her hand, Riene officially takes her oath as the 13th lord of the territory. The court responds with a vow of absolute loyalty, cementing her new authority. But the celebration is cut short when a violent storm rips through the city. Citizens initially cheer, thinking their new leaders are just providing more rain, until the weather turns from a blessing into a chaotic disaster. The protagonist realizes something is wrong as the atmosphere starts acting like a massive chemical reaction. It turns out the low-tier witches tasked with the job were a bit too enthusiastic. That liquid nitrogen created a mushroom cloud effect that nobody was prepared to handle. This massive blunder gives the council exactly the opening they were looking for. The assistant rushes back to the hall to explain the mess, admitting she tried to show off by involving too many inexperienced magic users. Their lack of control turned a simple weather spell into a torrential nightmare. Evelyn immediately seizes the moment to frame this as the return of the Calamity Witch. She lists off every legal violation Riene has committed since escaping her execution, cornering her student and demanding a public admission of guilt for the disaster, even though the staff tries to take the blame for the failed operation. A messenger interrupts the trial with even worse news. The wind blew the castle gates wide open and a mob is already breaking into the grounds. Evelyn thinks she has the public on her side, but the mob breaking through the doors is not there to lynch anyone. These people are actually shouting for their new lord, thanking her for finally bringing the rain, and they're ready to throw hands with the bureau to keep Riene safe. Seeing the people rally gives her a moment of relief, but the teacher is not backing down. She brings up the trauma of the past, claiming Riene's uncontrolled magic lured in monsters back when she was 9, and that her mother's sacrifice was the only thing that saved the city from the mess she made. This narrative paints her as a repeat offender who destroyed a village and escaped justice just to cause more storms today. The pressure is on for a full confession, with the council demanding she just admit to being a walking disaster. It looks like the weight of the accusations is finally pushing her towards surrender, especially since she's being told her very existence is a crime beyond any legal dispute. Just as things look bleakest, Shep steps up to pull her back from the edge. This entire trial is a joke to him, and he's quick to label their evidence as total nonsense. Worrying is off the table now that he has stepped in to handle the defense personally. The teacher tries to lean on her official investigation as proof, but the MC has zero respect for her title. He's making it clear that science is about the truth, not about who has the loudest title, and he is ready to show everyone just how ignorant their tribunal actually is. The council's lead investigator wasn't prepared for someone to challenge the logic of her tribunal, especially when he asks the crowd if any of them actually witnessed the disaster 9 years ago. The silence is deafening as they realize their hatred is based on rumors instead of reality. The crowd admits they did not actually see her cause the disaster, only that the two events happened at once. Shep points out that timing does not prove guilt, and the logic is starting to win people over. Evelyn tries to salvage the argument by claiming the timing itself is enough to prove a link, and it's a connection that flips their entire perspective on what a victim really is. He compares it to a chef attracting bandits with the smell of good food, making the crowd admit that the attacker is the criminal, not the person who drew them in. This logical trap hits the investigator hard, but she quickly pivots to the time Riene allegedly leveled a village during a mana rampage. Princess Xia is called forward as the star witness who saw the whole thing go down. Before the princess speaks, the investigator demands Riene give her own account of that day. Shep wants to cross-reference their memories to make sure there are no convenient errors in the testimony, but Riene admits she was completely unconscious for the entire event and only saw the wreckage after she finally came to. Xia is ready to double down on her previous statement to the tribunal, and since the people are watching, the investigator wants a public play-by-play of the disaster. The princess swears on her royal title that she's about to give the absolute truth, testifying that she found Riene floating in the air after the village was already leveled, which confirms she did not actually see the moment the destruction started. Shep points out this massive hole in her testimony, but the investigator argues that being the only powerhouse present makes her the only possible suspect. Shep points out that without a solid chain of evidence, anyone could have caused the disaster and fled before help arrived. Since there is nothing linking her to the scene, he asks why the investigator is so desperate to pin this on Riene specifically. The crowd starts to think the tribunal is just trying to nerf House Caroline by taking out their strongest asset. Evelyn is not about to let a bunch of commoners question her authority and drops a massive display of magic to force everyone into silence. She insists the tribunal's verdict is final and she's only here to take the fugitive back into custody. Armed guards move in to back her up, as she threatens to arrest anyone who stands in the way of her official duties. Shep is not intimidated, though, revealing he spent the last few days studying every page of the imperial law books. This specific clause, Article 66, covers the legal rights of those facing a wrongful accusation. Basically, if the prisoner is eventually found innocent, any resistance or escape they made is not considered a crime. Zia is shocked he actually found a loophole in 5 massive volumes of law to shut down a seasoned investigator. Evelyn turns her focus back to Riene, demanding to know if she truly believes she is innocent. The pressure is on, but Riene refuses to back down or be intimidated by her former teacher. Riene sticks to her guns, apologizing for the defiance but refusing to take the fall for something she did not do. Seeing the stalemate, the princess steps in to remind everyone that she is the ultimate authority on imperial justice. Zia argues that punishing a lord without concrete evidence would be a massive overreach of the law. Since they cannot settle this with human testimony, Evelyn prepares to escalate the trial to a whole new level. The investigator calls upon the goddess of magic to provide a definitive answer, and officially begins the divine judgment to see if Riene is truly a heretic. Evelyn lays out the deal. If Riene passes the trial, she is officially cleared of all charges. And the terms are simple: survival equals innocence, but the stakes could not be higher. Shep thinks this is the perfect opportunity to finally wash away the stigma on Riene's name, but the princess knows better than to trust a ritual that feels more like an execution. Riene is clearly shaken as the reality of what she's being asked to do starts sinking in. The weight of the situation hits the rest of the group as they discuss the ritual's history. Turns out every single witch who has ever faced the goddess's judgment has died in the process. Even the legendary 9-tier masters could not survive what the Bureau is calling a fair test. Evelyn just shrugs it off, claiming those women were heretics who got exactly what they deserved. She continues to taunt them, asking if they're too afraid to let Riene prove her innocence. Riene is caught between a rock and a hard place while the investigator keeps the pressure on. Her followers try to keep their spirits up, but the crowd knows this is a death sentence. Shep realizes this is just a convenient way for the Bureau to eliminate their political dissenters, but since they've been backed into a corner, he decides to play along with their game. It's a gamble they have to take if they want any chance of leaving this place alive. He steps up to Riene's side, making it clear she won't be facing the goddess alone. The kid shocks the entire room by demanding to undergo the divine judgment alongside his master, because as her summoned beast, he argues his magic is inseparable from hers for the trial. Evelyn is actually impressed by the sheer audacity and agrees to let the boy participate. The final judgment is set for dusk at the city square, leaving them very little time to prepare. Shep is not interested in a long lecture on the trial, insisting he knows exactly what to pack. Riene changes the subject entirely, asking if there are any personal wishes she can help him fulfill. The question catches him off guard while he is busy stuffing his bag with gear. He jokingly lists his old-world bucket list, like becoming a top streamer with millions of fans. He tells her to forget about those impossible dreams and focus on preparing for the trial instead. But Riene takes the request for romance a lot more seriously than he expected. Before he can finish packing, she reaches out and stops him in his tracks. The Saintess suddenly pulls him into a tight embrace, completely throwing him for a loop. He starts sweating, wondering if this is some weird pre-battle ritual he did not sign up for. She whispers that if it is romance he wants, she is more than willing to provide it. Romance is not something you just conduct like a ritual, though, and he tries to explain that. But Riene does not seem to care about the social nuances of a normal relationship. Shep asks her to let go so they can actually focus on the life-or-death trial ahead. Instead, she leans in even closer, determined to check that wish off his list right now. The kid cannot believe how blunt she is being, even given the circumstances. Shia interrupts the awkward moment, noting that their lack of stress makes her advice seem useless. Shep calls her out for the intrusion while still being pinned down by the Saintess. He demands to know why she's hanging around after her earlier attempt to get Riene executed. Shia reveals her true colors, admitting that a quick death was never her actual goal. She wants to see Riene's face distorted by pure despair, finding that much more entertaining than a disappearance. Shep finally sees Shia for who she really is, acknowledging her twisted desire for despair. He shoots back that as long as he is by Riene's side, she's going to be disappointed. Shia lays out the rules of the road, mentioning 3 trials of fire, abyss, and hurricane, and warns that magic will be suppressed, making his little gadgets their only hope. The kid just thanks her for the heads up, sounding way too confident for someone facing execution. They step into the grand hall where a massive crowd and the high priestess await. The adjudicator calls out to the Calamity Witch, promising a verdict from the goddess herself. A glowing crystal pulses with energy, signaling the start of the divine judgment process. Shep grabs her hand and promises they'll make it through this fake trial together as they get enveloped in light and step into the first phase of the gauntlet. The pair lands on a stone platform suspended over a literal sea of flames. Riene immediately notices something is off with the mana in this specific dimension, where most elements are heavily suppressed and fire is the only one at full power. Shep spots a glowing orange portal that looks like it was ripped straight out of Marvel, and while it's clearly the exit, there's a long, dangerous path standing in their way. Falling off means instant incineration, so they have to be perfect with every step. He starts planning how to cross the narrow bridge without getting toasted, but Riene stops him, suggesting they do not actually need to walk at all because she can just use wind magic to fly them both over to the altar. The observers realize she can use all 5 basic magics, making this trial look easy. Evelyn calculates that Riene's plan to fly is a total death sentence, knowing the mana suppression here makes carrying a full-grown man impossible. She turns to her teacher, confident the trial will end in a public disaster. Shia prays for protection, but the stakes are high since this gauntlet filters out heretics. This entire ordeal is being broadcast to the public through a massive radiant projection, and while the priestess hopes for a miracle, the enemies are just waiting for a scandal. Even the friends watching from afar are terrified that Riene might actually try to fly. Inside the trial, Shep grabs her hand and puts the brakes on that plan, bringing up the time she nearly killed him by dropping him during a flight. He suggests a quick field test to see exactly how much their magic is being nerfed. They use stones to measure the distance and power of her current output, realizing she's only operating at 10% strength despite being a top-tier mage. After calculating their combined weight and the 50-meter distance of the bridge, the math proves they'd run out of mana and fall halfway to their deaths. Riene pivots to using water magic to try and extinguish the sea of flames, but Shep decides they should use it to create a path to walk on instead. The observers think he's gone crazy as he starts drawing symbols on the ground, wondering if the kid is writing his final will before they both get toasted. He's actually solving complex thermodynamics to find the exact mana required for the ice. This sudden display of modern science catches the eye of a very interested spectator. The spectators recognize Shep's scribbles as the same science he used during his last job. He finishes the math and realizes they only need about half a liter of water to make the trip. Shep tells Riene to wrap them in a sphere of water magic to get them across safely. She's skeptical and worried about getting boiled alive once they hit the heat, but he shuts that down by explaining the laden frost effect. As long as the surface is hot enough, the evaporating steam creates a protective layer of insulation. It's the same physics behind firewalking rituals, letting the liquid float right over the heat. Riene is stunned by the logic, and things get even more intense when Shep scoops her up into a bridal carry. He explains that holding onto each other is the only way to move fast enough, leaving her completely speechless as she stares into his eyes. She eventually gives in, struggling to stay focused on the task at hand. With the plan set, he gives the signal to activate her water magic. Riene conjures a concentrated sphere of water around them, encasing both of them in a shimmering blue shield. Shep then adds a blast of wind magic to serve as their driving force, and they prepare to launch themselves directly into the sea of flames. They shoot forward like a cannonball, with the expanding steam rolling them across the passage. The observers watching through the portal can't believe a tiny bit of water is actually working. One high-ranking spectator is already convinced they have been incinerated by the heat. Back in the observation room, the girls are desperately praying for a miracle. All the portal shows is a massive cloud of steam where the duo just disappeared. But then a silhouette breaks through the white mist, and Shep steps onto solid ground with Riene still in his arms. The instructors are caught completely off guard by their survival, while the rest of the students start cheering for their mighty summoned beast. Even the onlookers who doubted them have to admit the plan worked, as the higher-ups realize they might have seriously underestimated Shep's capabilities. Still, the lead examiner is not satisfied yet, noting the trial is far from over. The situation gets worse when the exit portal starts shrinking, leaving them only 5 minutes to escape. Riene prepares to drop another water shield to finish the race, but Shep cuts her off before she can waste the mana. He points out the heat is so intense here that a small amount of water would just evaporate instantly. Instead of brute forcing it, he asks about the elemental density of the air around them. Riene realizes both wind and fire elements are concentrated enough to be used together, and she starts channeling that energy into a new movement spell. The plan involves flying them over the flames from above to skip the remaining terrain, though Shep immediately objects because the upper air is where the heat is most lethal. She ignores the protest and finishes the spell, creating a localized whirlwind to lift them up. Realizing he has no choice but to follow her lead, he braces himself for the final stretch. Shep corrects her, explaining that the real way to use wind magic here is not for flight, but to clear a path directly through the wall of fire. The spectators watching from the balcony think he's insane, since everyone knows wind usually just feeds a blaze. One examiner recalls how his summoned beast managed to pull off a similar trick before, but the lead examiner argues these flames are different. They're being fueled by high-tier magic crystals from the altar itself, leading her to believe that any gust of wind will only hasten their deaths. She tells the crowd to watch closely as the duo brings about their own destruction. Still, those who have seen Shep's luck before are not counting him out just yet. Back on the bridge, he admits this is a desperate gamble with no guarantee of success, requiring absolute precision from Riene. If her control slips for even a second, they won't survive the feedback. Riene does not really get the science behind his theory, but magic is something she knows she can handle. The plan is to manifest 2 massive tornadoes on either side of the path, spinning in completely opposite directions. As they pick up speed, the centrifugal force throws the air outward, creating a vacuum in the middle. This low-pressure zone acts like a giant straw, sucking the oxygen away from the flames and starving the fire of its fuel. By disrupting the combustion chain reaction, the opposing winds will literally tear the wall of fire apart. Once they meet, the resulting air pressure will force the heat down and keep the path clear of any stray embers. Shep knows they cannot actually extinguish magic fire coming from an unknown source, but they do not need to put it out forever. They just need a short enough window to sprint through the gap. While the Academy watches the impossible unfold, his allies pray that the goddess protects them as they initiate the final dash. The faculty cannot believe their eyes as the vacuum strategy actually works, clearing a path right through the heart of the magical inferno. With the flames temporarily parted, Shep gives his partner the green light, knowing they just have to repeat their earlier move to make it through. The exit portal is already beginning to collapse in on itself, leaving them with only a few seconds to cross the finish line. Instead of making her run the whole way, the kid sweeps Riene off her feet to maximize their speed. It's a high-stakes dash where every millisecond counts toward their survival. And with the timer ticking down, he makes a break for the shrinking ring of light, promising to clear the gap before the portal closes for good. They dive into the swirling vortex just as the path seals behind them. Back at the Academy, the crowd erupts in cheers for their successful escape, but the portal is misaligned and yeets them out over a vast ocean. Plummeting toward the waves, it looks like they have traded fire for a watery grave. But Shep remembers a specific hint Zia gave him before his transmigration. He pulls out a survival item that inflates into a massive yellow float, cushioning their fall just as they slam into the freezing water. The drop did not kill them, but Riene spots a much bigger problem nearby, where a colossal waterspout is already churning up the sea. Facing a combined water, tornado, and deep-sea whirlpool is a total nightmare scenario. And Shep knows they have to locate the final portal immediately to survive the stage. But in an ocean this vast, there is no telling if the exit is in the sky or under the waves. Riene steps up and uses her magic sensing to track the mana signature of the passage, pinpointing the exit right at the bottom of that massive, churning whirlpool. The instructors watching the broadcast realize the portal is going to keep expanding until it shreds them. And they are convinced no witch can survive this while dragging a human burden along. Even so, the fans back at the Academy are still betting on Shep to find a loophole. Shep runs the math and realizes the physics here are basically a death sentence. And when he admits the situation is unsolvable, the observers start losing their minds. The rotation speed increases the closer you get to the eye of the storm, creating sheer forces that would tear a human body apart in seconds. Their only slim chance is landing perfectly inside the low-pressure cavity at the very center. Riene is ready to burn the rest of her mana to force a path through the rotation, but Shep stops her because her core is already at its limit from the previous fight. Instead of relying on mana, he pulls out a new item to try a different approach. Trying to solve a physical problem with pure fantasy logic is a trap he is not falling into. Even as the towering wall of water prepares to swallow them whole. With their hero seemingly giving up on a direct solution, the crowd starts to lose hope, watching in silence as the duo is pulled into the most dangerous stage yet. Back at the observation deck, the high-ranking officials are losing their nerve, especially now that it looks like the goddess has completely pulled her gaze away. Without divine protection, the Academy staff is basically watching a slow-motion disaster. Down in the eye of the storm, Shep admits he cannot protect Riene anymore, and his apology makes it sound like he has finally accepted the inevitable. Riene is already mentally preparing for death, figuring that dying by his side is enough, but then he clarifies that a lack of solutions does not actually mean they are dead. He points to the sky, realizing the next stage is not through the whirlpool but right above them. Instead of diving into the vortex, he wants to take a shortcut straight to the ceiling. The idea of skipping an entire stage has the observers questioning his sanity, but Shep explains that the whirlpool is just a bridge between two different seas. He tracked the survival blanket he threw earlier and saw it get sucked up into the sky, proving that the top and bottom of this zone are physically connected by the stream. The plan is to have Riene use her remaining mana to force the water into a sudden eruption, essentially using the whirlpool like a high-pressure elevator to blast them upward. Even though she is exhausted, the girl decides to go all out one last time for him, and as the spell takes shape, the ambient mana in the water starts to react. Riene confirms she can handle it, trusting his crazy logic over her own survival instincts. A massive pillar of water explodes upward, catching them in the center of the blast, and they are launched toward the hollow space above as the logic of the stage breaks. Shep realizes the moment they cross that boundary, everything changes. Gravity pulls a complete U-turn, dropping them straight into the sea that was just sitting on the ceiling. They hit the water hard, but the shortcut actually worked. Riene is completely spent after that last spell, and she starts drifting away in the current. She's not responding to his calls, slipping further down into the depths. Shep dives in after her, refusing to let his partner drown after they made it this far. He manages to catch her hand just before she's out of reach, pulling her into his arms to get her back to the surface before they both run out of air. With her still unconscious, he has to make a split-second call to save her. They finally wash up on a small patch of land, but she's still not breathing. He starts mouth-to-mouth immediately, focusing on nothing but getting her lungs working again. Back in the observation room, the viewers are absolutely losing it, convinced that Shep is just using the emergency as an excuse to make a move on her. The CPR actually pays off and Riene finally starts coughing the water out of her system. She comes back to her senses, confused about where they are and how she survived. The realization of what just happened hangs in the air, making things pretty awkward for a second. Shep immediately gets defensive, swearing he was only trying to keep her alive. Riene does not say much, just processing the fact that his insane plan actually landed them here. Looking around, they realize they are not just in a different part of the ocean, they've successfully skipped the entire stage and reached the space above the sea surface. The crowd is going wild, convinced the goddess is finally favoring them again through Riene. Passing this final trial is the only way for her to officially clear her name and status. High-ranking observers are watching the duo's every move through their monitoring lenses, and they decide it's time to release the legendary illusory rainbow butterfly. The spectators recognize the creature immediately as it takes flight toward the sea, leading the way toward the next objective. Shep spots a massive waterspout and realizes that flying is the only way they'll reach the portal. Riene tries her best to gather mana, but her reserves are completely tapped out. It would take a full day to recover, but the portal is going to vanish way before then. He starts analyzing the airflow, wondering if they can use the natural wind currents instead. While she worries about holding him back, our guy mentions he knows how to fly using tools that do not require a single drop of magic. The spectators are baffled by the idea of someone taking to the skies without using mana. Even the proctors are starting to believe that the trial of wind will not be enough to stop them, as the butterfly descends to bring the trial to an end. Shep tells her to just sit back while he handles the logistics, pulling out materials from his bag to build some outside technology. This display of confidence reminds everyone of Riene's childhood. Back when she shocked the entire village by floating in the air without any training, proving she was a magical genius who awakened her powers way ahead of her time. Riene recalls making her friends float as a kid but quickly snaps back to reality. Those memories feel like a distant dream now. Meanwhile, Shep is geeking out over the island's magic array, realizing the structure follows a logic similar to scientific formulas. The kid is convinced whoever built this place was a genius. Back in the day, everyone called Riene a prodigy for mastering every element, though that same power made normal people keep their distance. And she tries to push the past aside to focus on the present. The glider is finally finished and ready for takeoff. Shep tells her to hop on and fuel the wind tunnel with her mana. Riene hesitates as the request triggers another dark memory. It goes back to an awakening ceremony where things went south. Her magic did not just activate, it summoned a literal storm and the uncontrolled energy began to tear through the room. That surge ended up attracting a massive plague beast to the village. Shep notices she's spacing out and tries to snap her out of it, but his partner is busy reliving the moment her power became a curse. The monster wanted more magic and she was the perfect target. She still carries the guilt of bringing that disaster onto her people. Shep tries to snap Riene out of it, but she is completely checked out and stuck in a traumatic loop. Outside the trial, the spectators realize something has gone horribly wrong as the mana spikes. An official seizes the chance to label her a heretic, claiming her true nature is finally coming out. The experts in the crowd identify the cause as a magic rampage triggered by mirage pollen, and if the mana invasion is not stopped, it'll be more than just a temporary breakdown. They expect her to lose her humanity and transform into a demon of pure destruction. Shep starts to realize the goddess is not just testing her, but seeing if he can survive the fallout. Dealing with a partner who turned into the final boss is a steep learning curve, and with the glider falling apart, his chances of making it out in one piece are looking slim. He decides his only play is to upgrade his equipment right in the middle of the storm. The observers think he has lost his mind when he starts digging around during the disaster. It looks like he's just playing with dirt, but he is actually engineering a non-Newtonian fluid. This mud shield is designed to get stronger the harder an impact hits it, and the crowd finally realizes he's using a physics hack to tank Riene's magical outburst. Even as the wind speed keeps climbing, the makeshift barrier holds its ground. Chunks of the environment start tearing loose and hurtling toward them like projectiles. Everyone watching is convinced this is the end for the pair, but the shield catches the debris without a scratch, proving his science actually worked. Riene is still stuck in her trance, unaware that her mana is tearing the place apart. Shep finally manages to close the distance and grab her while she continues to cry out for her mother. Shep realizes the only way to snap her out of it is to play the one person she needs most. Bro reluctantly takes on the role of her male mother to reach through the trauma. Knowing she can still hear him, he starts breaking down the walls she built to hide from the pain. Talking her through the guilt, he explains that the magic beasts and her mother's death were not her fault, and reminds her of all the people she has actually saved since they met. Promising to wait for her, he tells her it is okay to finally just let go and sleep. As he holds her, he starts humming a melody that drifts through the chaos of the storm. The observers recognize the tune immediately, and it's not just some random song. It's a lullaby, the same one the high-ranking officials remember from years back. The song is the only thing that could ever calm Riene down when she was a kid. Lady Zinna used to hum it to her whenever the weight of her power got too heavy to carry. In her mind, Riene hears her mother's voice explaining that being powerful is not a sin, and that her magic was meant to protect the people she loves, not hurt them. With one final push, the memory of her mother tells her it's time to wake up. Riene finally opens her eyes, the mana rampage instantly cutting out as she comes back to reality. Feeling like she's been in a long dream, she notices the pressure in the air has completely shifted. Her mana has not just stabilized, it has actually surged to a level way higher than before the trial. Now that she's back, Bro is ready to stop playing babysitter and finally finish this exam so they can go eat. They team up, linking their power to break out of the simulated environment once and for all, and Riene lets loose a massive, controlled blast that shatters the trial's illusions like glass. Shep and Riene charge into the portal together to finally finish this. Instead of landing back in the hall, they end up somewhere completely new. It's a literal graveyard of giant skeletons surrounding a massive goddess statue. The observers on the outside are losing their minds because they've never seen this hidden stage before. Since nobody has ever survived the trial, this secret battlefield was a complete mystery until now. With the trial technically cleared, it's time for the official verdict to be read. Evelyn announces to the entire room that Riene is officially not a heretic. Back inside the zone, the duo stands before the remains of a fallen deity. Shep catches a glimpse of a strange red gem embedded in the statue's forehead, but they don't have time to loot it before the teleportation kicks in. Riene grabs onto him as the world starts to dissolve around them. They finally manifest back in the main ritual hall in front of everyone. The crowd erupts into cheers, hailing Riene and her summoned beast as heroes. Bro is not interested in the fame and tells everyone to pipe down for a second. Riene stays close, still processing the weight of their victory. Ignoring the fans, Shep walks straight up to the head of the bureau. He reminds Evelyn that the trial is done and the results are undeniable. It's time to settle the score for the years of stigma Riene and her mother had to endure. He points a finger and demands a public apology right then and there. The crowd follows his lead, turning the pressure up on the officials to finally make things right. Riene looks to her teacher for a response to Shep's demand. Evelyn is not ready to fold yet, claiming this fight is far from over. She decides to take the matter to the royal capital and turns to leave. Shep does not let them walk away quietly, calling them out for acting tough while retreating. Bro's positive student persona is officially dead after that outburst. He mocks them for hiding behind their religion when they cannot win an argument, and even the officials are left speechless by the public roasting. Once the eyesores finally clear out, the atmosphere shifts completely. The citizens start chanting Zai Pu's name like he is a local deity. Enjoying the flattery, he tells the crowd to keep the praise coming, and honestly, he is living for the attention after all that stress. The crowd will not stop talking about how he protected Riene during the trial. They have already decided there is a romance brewing between the beast and his summoner. That's when the news drops that the entire trial was broadcast to the whole nation. Shep realizes his every move was caught on a magical live stream. Now the fans are not just cheering, they are demanding a wedding date. The entire city has officially turned into a shipping fan club. This was not the perfect ending he had in mind for his reputation. Glancing over at Riene, he realizes there's no easy way out of this, and the two of them are left standing there in the middle of a national shipping war. Things are still incredibly awkward between Shep and Riene after the national broadcast. So even a simple morning greeting feels like a mountain they cannot climb. He tries to play it cool, but the tension in the room is thick enough to cut. To escape the shipping rumors, he's been hiding away in the workshop for the past few days. He's using the downtime to analyze a gem Riene recovered from the floating island, noticing the patterns on it match the magic array from their last adventure. If he can crack the code, he might actually figure out how to build a working airship. The peaceful research session ends when Janice and her friends show up for their lesson, and they brought along a much larger crowd than he expected. Everyone heard he was tutoring, so the workshop is suddenly packed with eager students. They even bring piles of gold coins just to secure a spot in the classroom. Faced with a literal mountain of tuition, he decides he's more than happy to teach. The girls skip the academic questions and jump straight to asking about the wedding date. Apparently, they just want to make sure their celebratory gifts are ready in time. This is the first he's hearing about a marriage ceremony actually happening, and it's clear the public has already planned out his entire future with Riene. The conversation takes a serious turn when the topic of Riene's status as a lord comes up. The queen plans to revoke her title if the territory's taxes and harvests do not improve soon. Shep realizes the financial situation is way worse than anyone let on, leaving them with only 9 months to fix 3 years of economic failure before Riene is ousted. Setting some hard boundaries, Shep makes it clear he is not a toy for these girls to play with. He warns them that touching him without permission is a quick way to get hurt. Riene finds his bluntness hilarious, though he is surprised she did not leave with the others. The rest of the bureau moved on to investigate the trial's aftermath. But she's stuck here under the Queen's orders to fix the agricultural crisis. It is officially time to get to work as the new Minister of Science. Shep jokes about needing a high salary to afford a wife, which just confuses his familiar. They dig into the records and realize the farmable land has been shrinking for years. Emerald Town used to be the primary source of their crop yield, but production there completely flatlined about 5 years ago. The advisor claims the soil is cursed and essentially unfarmable at this point. This curse sounds like a massive excuse for poor scientific understanding. Shep wishes they had a real agricultural expert to deal with this superstition. The only logical move is to head down to Emerald Town and investigate. However, the head advisor shuts down the trip before they can even pack. Apparently, the lady has much more pressing matters to attend to at home. Shep cannot imagine what is more important than saving the territory from ruin. He realizes they've even taken over his office for these secret plans. It turns out the urgent task is for Riene to finalize her marriage proposal to him. The advisor points out that Shep basically sacrificed his reputation for Riene during the trial, so they cannot afford to look like weak or indecisive leaders in front of the people. She pushes for a quick marriage to shut down any potential gossip before it starts. But Riene is still worried about forcing him into a life he might not actually want. The advisor is not letting it go though and asks if she even has feelings for the guy, which Riene confirms through a reaction that makes her internal thoughts pretty obvious. The advice shifts to taking the initiative because men apparently need to be pursued with gifts, and if she does not move fast, some other woman is bound to snatch him up first. That realization finally hits home and Riene decides she cannot just sit around anymore. Cut to the woods where Shep is trekking toward his investigation site with a heavy pack, but he keeps getting the nagging feeling that someone is stalking him through the brush. A quick look back reveals nothing but trees, so he assumes it is just a hallucination from hunger. It turns out he was right because Riene is following him in secret with her assistants. And while they set up a hidden camp, Floro starts overthinking their current situation. She is convinced that Shep leaving Riene behind to find them is some kind of romantic sign and starts wondering if the boss actually has his eye on her instead of the lady. Since she thinks he is just being shy, she decides it is her turn to be proactive. Shep is currently too busy complaining about the lack of basic infrastructure in this territory. And just when he's reaching his limit with the whole camping situation, Floro jumps out to offer him a bouquet and a very direct confession. Shep appreciates the gesture, but the simple flower is not exactly a game changer. Watching from the shadows, Riene is not about to let an assistant outdo her in the gift department. Instead of a romantic spark, Floro gets a firm pinch on the cheek and a reality check. The boss reminds his staff they were hired for their skills, not to turn the expedition into a dating show. While Floro pouts over the rejection, her colleague points out that Shep operates on a completely different wavelength. Exhausted by the constant chatter, he just wants a moment of peace to clear his head. He takes a breather and admits to himself that Riene's quirks are actually pretty charming. A little bit of time passes while the forest remains quiet. But when he looks down, a massive bouquet of red roses has magically appeared in his hands. Confusion sets in as he demands to know which of them is responsible for the floral upgrade. Floro insists they're innocent, even starting to wonder if Shep is the one trying to play hard to get. Tired of the games, he calls out toward the trees and warns Riene to stop the harassment before he retaliates. Riene finally steps out of hiding, shocked that her cover was blown so easily. And Shep explains that while he felt the stalking, the roses were the dead giveaway. The assistants finally accept that their boss is way out of their league as they prepare to move out. Riene starts briefing the group on the agricultural stats of Emerald Town, but the conversation about record-breaking potato yields does not match the reality they find at the border. Her nostalgic memories of beautiful harvests and happy festivals are quickly shattered. Because the people they encounter inside the town look like they have not seen a full meal in years, before they can even ask what happened, a sudden scream from a local signals that things are far worse than a simple crop failure. Shep notices the locals reacting like they have just seen a ghost, and they immediately start prostrating themselves in total desperation. A group of women brings a young girl forward, begging for help to save the town. Shep wonders why they are trying to offer up a kid as some kind of sacrifice, but he quickly realizes they have recognized Riene from the goddess's trial. It turns out this little girl is actually Lin, the town mayor who has not seen Riene in years. Riene cuts straight to the chase and asks what happened to turn the place into a graveyard. Lin explains that a plague magic beast is the source of all their misery. Apparently this monster cursed the soil, making the crops toxic and impossible for even witches to purify. With other towns refusing to help out of fear, the locals were left to starve in isolation. Shep picks up a local dog to examine the situation, doubting it is a simple curse. The mayor snaps at him to keep his mouth shut if he does not know anything about magic, which really grinds his gears since she is only being nice to Riene. Instead of arguing, he decides to let the land reveal the truth itself. Riene is baffled when he mentions interrogating the dirt, but he has a plan. He tells her to blast the soil with high-temp blue flames to see what reacts. A foul stench immediately fills the air as the ground starts cooking, and Riene feels something deep in the earth actively fighting back against her magic. The smoke suddenly shifts into a vibrant purple color. And Shep warns everyone to clear it out fast before the fumes drive the entire town insane. Lin freaks out about the madness gas, threatening to bite him if she loses her mind, but the fumes eventually settle to reveal what's been hiding under the surface. Shep wraps up his little interrogation, having seen exactly what he needed in the dirt. He grabs a sample of the blackened soil and drops a truth bomb. This isn't a curse. It's just heavy metal pollution, specifically a massive buildup of iron and manganese. The locals are stunned by the weird terminology, but he's dead serious about the diagnosis. He breaks it down simply, comparing the land to a person who just ate something toxic. Lin argues that whether you call it a curse or a poison, the result is still dead crops. And that's where she's wrong because Shep knows exactly how to treat soil that's been gunked up. His confidence wins her over immediately, but not everyone is impressed by the science flex. One of the girls calls him out for flirting when he's supposed to be working, so he pivots back to the mission, reminding them they still have to hit their harvest targets. Even if the soil is fixed, they're still thousands of tons short of the projected goal, and his rival tells him he might as well quit now while he's still ahead. Shep just smiles and lays out a plan to squeeze 3 seasons of growth into 1 year. He tells the old thing to stop being so self-righteous just because she's bad at math, which almost gets him killed until Renee steps in to protect her favorite scientist. She makes it clear that he's under her protection as the official minister of science, pulling him back and shutting down any further attempts at a beatdown. Still, the others are convinced that trying to force the land to yield that much is just a daydream. Shep vows to turn this daydream into a reality that'll shut the skeptics up for good, forcing a tense handshake with the rivals to seal the deal for the sake of the town. With the politics settled, the team moves into a temporary residence that's already been prepped. Shep is quick to praise the assistant for her initiative, though he still takes credit for leading such a capable group. As he heads back to work, Renee can't seem to take her eyes off him, and her friend warns her that a guy this capable is going to be a magnet for competition. Feeling the pressure to be useful, she asks if there's anything she can actually help with. He tries to play it cool by saying her just being there is enough, but she does not catch the hint, leaving him to pivot back to the task at hand. There actually is one major favor he needs from her as the local lord. They move the operation over to the temporary office to look at the blueprints, where the scientist has been grinding away at a specific ecological breakthrough. It's a closed-loop soil remediation plan that uses a mix of plants and microorganisms to clean the land. He needs Renee to officially authorize the execution so they can start the heavy lifting. She recognizes the sunflowers and sedum on the list, but one specific drawing stops her cold. It's a long, squiggly shape that she's never seen in her life, and Shep has to explain that it is just an earthworm, assuming she's just never farmed before. She claims she played in the mud plenty as a kid, but these creatures definitely were not in it. Even the rest of the team admits they've never seen a single worm in the local soil, leaving the man wondering if his drawing is just that bad or if the ground is more dead than he thought. Even the other guys confirm they've never seen anything like that in the dirt. Shep refuses to believe it and starts digging through every patch of mud he can find. It's a total bust, and the reality of a wormless world starts to sink in. He cannot wrap his head around how an entire ecosystem functions without such a basic decomposer. Renee asks if these squiggly things are actually that vital to his remediation plan. Turns out they are the MVPs of soil health, cleaning out heavy metals and keeping the groundwater safe. Without them, the 3-month timeline to fix Emerald Town's soil is basically dead in the water. As he hits rock bottom, the group wonders if slimes could fill that ecological niche instead. They share a lot of the same habits, living in dark, damp spots and dissolving whatever they engulf. A quick check of the monster encyclopedia confirms they might be the perfect fantasy substitute. Renee leads him to a nearby cave that's known for being a local slime hotspot. Shep plays it safe and tells her to stick close so she does not slip on the way down. They head deep into the tunnels, looking for their first biological test subject. It does not take long before they spot a small blue one chilling on the cave floor. He whips out a net and snags the thing before it can even react. Catching slimes is basically second nature to him since he spent his childhood hunting frogs. He hands over the gear and tries to get Renee to take a shot at the next one. She's hesitant because slimes are hypersensitive to the massive amount of magic she carries, but he insists it's more about the physical technique than any kind of mana output. He gets behind her to show her the proper wrist flick needed to bag a monster without scaring it off. Shep gives Renee the green light to take her first shot at catching a slime. She tries to focus on the technique, but having a crowd of one is clearly getting to her. Her swing is a total miss and the slime manages to dodge the net with zero effort. Things take a turn when the monster decides it is tired of being hunted. It puffs up and fires a high-pressure blast of water directly at them. Renee is ready to blast back with magic, but that would probably destroy the specimen. Shep has to jump in and pull her out of the way before she gets soaked. He shields her from the attack and manages to kick the slime back to create space. After the dust settles, he checks to make sure his partner is actually okay. The sudden close contact leaves them both a little embarrassed, but there is no time to dwell on it. They head back to the village with a bag full of slimes ready for the experiment. The locals are instantly skeptical, doubting that common monsters can fix their land. They're convinced the soil is cursed. While Shep is looking at a heavy metal pollution problem, he sets up a demonstration on a table to show everyone exactly how this works. A single slime is placed on the polluted dirt to act as a biological filter. It starts absorbing the toxic material, much to the confusion of the gathered crowd. The villagers remain doubtful, thinking years of bad luck cannot be fixed by a blue blob. One guy even jokes that if it were this easy, they would have tried it years ago. But the room goes quiet when a girl points out that the slime just pooped. That waste is perfectly clean soil, proving the slimes can literally digest the town's curse. Shep realizes the slimes are basically organic recyclers, turning toxic ore into clean soil. Renee is amazed seeing the dirt transition from a black, stinking mess to something fertile. And it's clear the curse on the land is finally starting to lift. The villagers are officially sold, realizing the guy who passed the goddess's trial is the real deal. They're already celebrating, dreaming of the town finally returning to its former glory. The strategy is simple: swap out earthworms for slimes to speed up the healing process, and according to his math, the entire area should be ready for replanting in just 3 months. One of the local girls gets a little too excited, practically tackling him and calling him a literal god. Riene is not exactly thrilled with the sudden competition for her partner's attention. She decides to mark her territory by quietly grabbing his hand, making sure there's no confusion about who he actually belongs to. Shep catches on immediately, choosing to prioritize his partner over the fan girl, and gently pushes the other girl away while keeping Riene close. He even makes sure everyone knows the earthworm idea was Riene's, giving her the public win. That's when Caroline steps in, finally seeing how all the pieces of his plan fit together. She realizes he's been thinking several steps ahead of everyone else this whole time. The locals are calling it a revolutionary ecological closed-loop system, which sounds way fancier than just using blobs. But Caroline points out a major bottleneck. They do not have nearly enough slimes to hit that 3-month goal. The plan is to raid the neighboring region for more since they have plenty of monsters to spare. But they are not the only ones watching, as a scout from that territory is already reporting back to her mistress. The scout rushes back to report the news before the neighboring team makes their move. She arrives at the Havoga Lord's castle to find her master in the middle of a spa day. Lady Esther is pretty annoyed at the interruption since she prioritizes her relaxation over everything else. But the report about Caroline using slimes to purify soil actually gets her attention. She thinks the idea is ridiculous, calling slimes worthless trash that even dogs would not bother with. Once she hears they plan on crossing the border to harvest these useless monsters, the news hits a nerve because Esther considers every resource in her land to be hers alone. She claims ownership over everything in Avoga, down to the very air people breathe, and warns that letting them take the slimes now will lead to them stealing her land and treasury later. This is not just about resources anymore. It is about making sure her neighbors do not get strong enough to ruin her sleep. Esther steps out of the bath with a plan to beat them at their own game. She orders her scout to hit the border towns and buy up every single slime available. The scout is confused why they would spend money on monsters they could just go out and catch. But Esther shuts that down immediately by calling her out for being short-sighted. She explains that if the commoners realize slimes can be traded for cash, they will swarm to catch every single one for her. It is a clever way to monopolize the supply and make a massive profit while leaving their rivals empty-handed. Esther thinks she is a genius for using her own money, since using tax silver would make the people think she is insane. She even breaks out a key to her private stash to fund the entire operation personally. Seeing the gold, the scout tries to see if there is a little finder's fee in it for her too, but Esther shuts that greed down with a quick reality check. Esther sends her scout off with a threat to dock her pay if she does not move fast. While she waits, she reflects on why the third princess chose to stay in Caroline's territory. It does not make sense unless there's something hidden there worth a royal's attention. Meanwhile, the team arrives at Waxy Lake ready to start their big harvest. Everyone is geared up with nets and ready for a massive haul. This spot is supposed to be crawling with slimes, so they're expecting an easy win, but the water is dead quiet and the shores are suspiciously empty. Not a single monster is in sight, which definitely was not part of the plan. They run into a local who's already bagged one of the last remaining slimes. He offers to sell it to them directly since the market is suddenly booming. Apparently, a mysterious buyer has already swept through and snatched up the entire local supply. Shep thinks this is great news because buying them is easier than catching them, but Caroline shuts him up before he can agree to any overpriced deals. The princess realizes they are being squeezed by someone hoarding the resource to bleed them dry. If they cannot find a way around this monopoly, the land purification project is finished. Shep gathers the team to collect every slime they manage to find in Emerald Town, but the final count is still far too low to satisfy their current requirements. Just as the situation reaches a dead end, his companion steps in with a potential game changer. She asks if he's looking for a way to actually increase the number of slimes they have, and begins sharing a method that might just break the monopoly Esther is trying to build. Riene explains that slimes do not actually die when they take a direct hit. Instead of disappearing, they just split into two separate and fully functional entities. She asks if this natural reproduction might be the key to their supply issue, giving Shep the perfect solution to bypass the monopoly Lady Esther has built. If they can manually trigger the splitting process, they can grow their own army. The kid is so hyped he practically tackles Riene in a sudden hug. Finally seeing a clear path to finishing the land purification project on time, and tells her to rest easy now that they have a winning strategy. The rest of the crew watches the two of them getting a little too cozy, commenting on how bold guys from other worlds seem to be these days. A well-timed fake cough breaks the moment and brings them back to reality as they quickly pull apart to focus on the actual logistics of the plan. One of the girls mentions she used to cut slimes into 16 pieces as a kid and proves the theory by shredding the poor things into tiny bits on the spot. Sure enough, a single slime turns into a whole pile of miniature versions. Shep calls out the dark childhood hobby, but he cannot argue with the results. This 16-to-1 ratio means they officially have enough resources to move forward. Even with the numbers fixed, he still feels like there is one more hurdle. Meanwhile, Lady Esther is lounging by the lake and treating slimes like afternoon snacks. Her relaxation is cut short when a messenger arrives with news that everything is falling apart. Lady Esther is trying to enjoy her tea, but the messenger will not stop nagging about work. He drops the bomb that Shep's group has figured out how to artificially breed slimes, which means the massive stash she has been hoarding is about to be worthless. Accusing him of a setup, she nearly shakes the life out of her informant for the bad news, but the messenger swears his loyalty is real even if her monopoly is currently crashing. Once he is finally free, he just wants to get away before she snaps again. Trying to offload her soon-to-be-useless inventory, she offers to sell the whole lot to him. He is not falling for it though, leaving her to mourn the loss of all that expected profit. Somewhere else, Riene is questioning why a fellow noble is acting like a common merchant. The woman explains her motives are actually the same as the princess's, claiming it is all about the money, even if that does not fit a royal identity. The offer is simple: stop asking questions and just become an accomplice in this deal. Meanwhile, Shep confirms that splitting the slimes works even if they are physically weaker now. These little guys cannot purify the land as well as the adults yet. So raising them to full size is going to be the next big project for the team. Shep promises they will do it together, creating a weirdly sentimental parenting moment, making the rest of the crew feel like they are accidentally intruding on a date. The bonding session is suddenly interrupted by a shout from across the field, as two people arrive with a massive caravan of slimes from the Havoga border. It turns out Lady Esther has decided to show up in person to deal with the competition. Esther walks up to Riene acting like they are childhood besties, leaving the princess completely stunned since she has no idea who this woman is. The merchant princess calls out the lie, pointing out that these two have literally never met before. Esther pivots immediately, claiming she's just been a huge fan of Riene from a distance for a long time. Then her attention shifts to the real prize, Zaipu, the summoned beast everyone is talking about. As she gets way too close for comfort and admits she's even more fascinated by him in person. This immediately triggers the jealousy of the rest of the crew, who are tired of every new woman falling for him. After the awkward introduction, the group tries to maintain some level of professionalism while they exchange greetings. Riene is secretly thrilled that a high-ranking noble is showing them this much respect, but she still wants to know the real reason Esther traveled all this way. Esther plays the hero role, claiming she specifically gathered a bunch of slimes because she heard the town was struggling. Zaipu catches onto the wording immediately, wondering how exactly she heard about their specific needs. She keeps up the act, insisting that helping them was worth the risk of going bankrupt herself. Riene starts to explain that they do not have the funds to pay back such a massive favor, especially since they just figured out how to multiply their own slimes and do not actually have a shortage anymore. Zaipu steps in to decline the offer, saying it would not be right to take her expensive slimes for free. The rejection catches Esther completely off guard since she expected them to be desperate. Riene makes it official, telling the lady they will be raising their own slimes from now on and will not be needing her help. Esther is forced to keep a polite smile while she internally seethes over how much Riene listens to this guy. She starts scanning him from head to toe, realizing that if she wants to control the situation, she has to win him over first. Esther starts guilt-tripping them, claiming she put in all this effort and money just to help the people of Caroline. Playing the pity card, she says if they do not want the slimes, she will just have to dump them in the wild. Zaipu sighs and reluctantly agrees to take them off her hands, making it look like he's doing her a favor. But he does not stop there, mentioning that the slimes they produce themselves are actually pretty weak at purifying things. Since she is so dedicated to helping out, he asks if they can send their baby slimes to her territory to grow big and strong. Esther is caught in her own trap and has to agree with a smile, even though she's basically running a free daycare now. Making a quick exit, she's left frustrated when the kid does not even bother walking her to the door. He's laughing internally because he knew she was just hoarding slimes to price gouge them. And instead of being her sucker, he decided to teach her a lesson about trying to rip them off. As they walk away, the maid cannot believe how badly this whole manipulation attempt backfired. To her, it looks like they were the ones begging to be scammed while the villagers acted like they were doing them a favor. She is convinced her lady has finally lost her mind by giving away their stash for free. Esther is not worried about the cost though, planning to just hit up the second princess for a full reimbursement. Even if the maid is skeptical, the lady is actually playing a much darker, longer game. She's figured out that while these slimes purify the soil, they also suck every last nutrient out of it. Helping them with a massive supply, she's actually sabotaging their land's fertility for years to come. The plan is to make sure Caroline stays weak so they cannot support the third princess in the future. Despite the trap she laid, Esther cannot help but look back and admire how sharp this guy is. His utility is so high she wishes there was a way to bind him as her own summoned beast. Meanwhile, at the Fano Chamber of Commerce, Merida is reflecting on some very clear teachings she has recently received. Merida is feeling the heat from her own family as the first princess's aide drops by to lay down the law, and Cecilian makes it clear she needs to stop being difficult and start putting the land family's interests first. Holding an invitation from Riene, the president can tell there is a serious storm brewing behind those polite words. Meanwhile, the group is out in the fields where the slimes are hard at work when a carriage rolls up. While the princess doubts the invitation will be accepted, the guy knows their guest is already pulling up. Merida steps out and immediately notices that Emerald Town is pulling off something way bigger than she expected. After a quick apology for the lack of a formal welcome, the group gets right into the reason for this visit. The president assumes they're here to beg for help with Caroline's taxes before the next cabinet meeting, and she wants to know exactly what they are willing to offer in exchange for her political support. Instead of begging, he flips the script and offers to sell her his liquid nitrogen technology for a high price. But she's not buying it, claiming her water witches can handle the rain without her spending a single coin. Thinking they've got nothing of value to offer, she decides this meeting is over and turns to walk away. Caroline tries to fix the situation, but the president is not interested in listening to more empty pitches. The guy does not try to stop her, simply warning her that walking away now is a mistake she'll regret later, as he points out that she's passing up a gold mine that would let her competitors leave her in the dust, leaving her with a choice between her pride and the kind of profit she cannot afford to lose. Back in the city, the commoners are trying to figure out what this new arrival is actually for. It turns out to be a specialized rainmaking tool that Zaipu personally designed for the common people to use. They are all pushing to get a closer look at a device that could solve their drought problems, but they quickly realize there is not a single drop of mana powering the machine. Even without mana, the device does exactly what it is supposed to do, and the witches are starting to think Zaipu's brain is on a whole different level than their top experts. But the real question is why he's bothering with rain in the first place, when the goal is not just water, but creating a massive agricultural boom with nitrogen fertilizer. Claiming to do the work of a harvest goddess sounds like pure fantasy to everyone listening. Yet he's already figured out how to pull gas from the air and turn it into something plants can actually eat. Technical terms get lost in translation, leading the girls to wonder if he's talking about literal eggs, and they are practically begging for him to show up and explain the science before they lose it. Right on cue, the man himself steps in to clarify that nitrogen is everywhere around them, proving that just because you cannot see or smell something does not mean it is not a game changer. With his assistant standing by, he prepares to show them exactly how this works in practice, starting with a little lightning magic to break down water into hydrogen gas. Once the ignition starts, the process moves into the purification phase, stripping away every trace of oxygen to keep the mixture as pure as possible. By reacting that hydrogen with nitrogen and cooling the result, he produces liquid ammonia, which is the secret sauce for both making rain and boosting crop growth to insane levels. While they will not see the harvest overnight, the potential for Emerald Town's future is massive, leaving the observers completely floored even if they do not understand the chemistry. Merida is watching from the sidelines, realizing this guy has already built a huge following, and she's starting to see that his influence might be more dangerous than she first thought. Merida offers to loan Caroline the money for a fee of 3 gold coins a day for every 1,000 borrowed, and while Floro initially feels bad for thinking the president was a crook, the math quickly catches up with the group. Zaipu loses his mind when he realizes that daily rate adds up to a staggering 110% interest per year. Realizing it is basically highway robbery, the team decides their first impression of her was actually spot on. Seeing their reaction, she pivots and offers to lend the entire sum to Caroline for free, leaving the kid suspicious about what the catch is going to be. Merida admits she has one small request that only he can satisfy, and as he waits for her to state her terms, the tension in the room hits a breaking point. He finally tells her to just come out with it, so she steps in close and repeats that she needs him. Specifically, she wants him to marry her. The proposal hangs in the air while she waits for his answer, sending him into a total tailspin as he tries to process the sudden jump from business to marriage. After catching his breath, he realizes this was a calculated move to throw him off balance during the negotiation. He tells her the trip was a waste of time since he will just take his business to someone else, but she reminds him that finding a merchant willing to take such a risk is not going to be easy. To make matters worse, her family runs the biggest chamber of commerce in the area, and she did not travel all this way to leave without getting exactly what she wanted. It's a brutal ultimatum: either take the predatory loan or marry her, or she'll make sure no one else ever touches his tech. Zaipu calls her out on the blatant threat, but Merida frames it as a standard business move. She insists that everything comes down to profit, although a private meeting reveals the Land family wants Caroline to fail. Merida is under orders to make sure the territory loses its leverage. She claims the current predatory offer is actually a favor, since his need for cash is far more desperate than her need for a deal. He buys himself 3 days to find an alternative just as Floro gets caught trying to listen through the door. The girl spills into the room the moment the conversation ends, and despite getting scolded for eavesdropping, she demands to know why the meeting was so secretive. Floro immediately guesses the marriage proposal was the real topic, hitting the nail on the head despite his attempts to hide it. He shuts down the gossip before it can spiral further while Merida heads out to find her own lodging in the city. Riene takes the news much harder and begs him not to sell his freedom. She offers to sell her mother's final gift to pay for the territory, but he tells her not to listen to Floro's exaggerations. The deadline is set for 3 days to get the loan without losing his soul. Zaipu promises that both the territory and the girls are off-limits for sale. He snaps into action with a plan to turn the barren land into a gold mine, pitching a goddess of harvest strategy to boost their crops with nitrogen fertilizer. By using slimes for soil purification and rain items for nutrients, he's basically speedrunning agriculture. Meanwhile, the third princess is using these breakthroughs as leverage in her own trial. She's trying to show respect to her master by sharing this high-level agricultural intel, claiming her past coldness was just a requirement of her royal position. It turns out the investigation into the territory links back to an ancient war, but her sudden interest is already raising red flags with the first and second princesses. They're starting to think this fight for the worst territory is actually a play for the throne. Her master offers to smooth things over with the sisters to keep the heat off, and the princess stays in the shadows while her influence silently grows. Her master wonders how the second princess is interpreting these sudden moves, and Yvette Azura is already treating the entire royal struggle like a game of chess. She thinks her sister is being a fool for making Caroline her primary piece, but decides she might be overthinking things and lets the match continue for now. Back at the lab, the protagonist is busy brewing up a different kind of miracle. He's extracting sunflower seed oil and predicts every witch in the land will want a drop. Riene stays by his side to finish the batch before the 3-day deadline hits, while the rest of the crew works through the night despite their blistered hands. Zaipu finishes brewing the world's first batch of high-end slime body wash, intending to use the luxury soap to drain every coin from Lady Merida's purse. His assistant is grossed out by the idea of anyone smearing sticky slime on their body, but the bottling process continues regardless of her lack of vision for the product. An urgent interruption brings news that the Lord of Havoga is back for another uninvited visit, leaving the town leaders wondering why these outsiders are so obsessed with their dirt. Over at the guest house, Esther is already plotting ways to secure the slime ore. Even as she complains about the local air smelling like absolute poverty, her personal alchemist is far more interested in the soil transformations, completely ignoring the social niceties to focus on the unique alchemy in the ground. Begging for even a shred of attention, the Lord finally gets her hosts to show their faces, and the atmosphere shifts immediately as the two parties come face to face. Zaipu arrives with Riene and their assistant to find out what the neighbors want. And Esther wastes no time cornering Riene with a mysterious request for help. Watching the interaction play out, the protagonist suspects there's a hidden motive at play. Esther claims her own territory is too comfortable and her people lack ambition, while the assistant ignores the political talk to focus on the alchemist's familiar face. To fix her problem, the Lord proposes a formal agricultural exchange and study group. And Zaipu plays along for now to keep the peace and avoid a diplomatic disaster. But the real shock comes when the assistant recognizes the guest as Shelina, a member of a legendary witch family. Discovering Shelina is a lightning attribute, which is a massive stroke of luck for the town. Zaipu realizes they have been looking for someone with those exact skills for their upcoming projects. Riene is not exactly thrilled though, muttering about how these guests always seem to want something for free. The protagonist plays it cool, framing the help as a mutual learning opportunity for everyone involved. Shelina gives her silent approval, seemingly fine with the idea of working in the local workshop. With the deal basically done, it is time to get the high-profile visitors situated. Zaipu officially puts Floro in charge of making sure the guests are well treated and settled. The assistant takes the job with way too much enthusiasm, promising to treat them like royalty. As she leads the group away, the dynamic of the visit completely shifts. Floro immediately starts laying on the charm, making sure the visitors feel right at home. But her kindness is not free, as she is already calculating how to squeeze some gold out of them. Since her boss refuses to charge for the exchange, she is taking the consultation fees into her own hands. Watching them go, Zaipu can only hope his assistant's greed does not cause a diplomatic incident. With the outsiders out of the way, the focus finally returns to their own internal business. Zaipu signals to Riene that it is finally time to start their secret project. Far away from the town, a separate power player reveals the real truth about Shelina. Not only is her family ruined, but she actually serves the second princess instead of Esther. Jinlis realizes this secret is vital and prepares to head back to warn the protagonist. The subordinate is stopped by the princess herself, who notices a sudden shift in her focus. It seems Jinlis is finally taking initiative, which is a massive change from her usual behavior. Jinlis concludes that Zaipu and Riene are likely in the dark about Shelina. Being so proactive for a man is a huge surprise for her to witness. It's obvious to anyone watching that the Lord is totally devoted to Riene. The truth of the situation is something she has already come to accept. Her only hope now is that they stay happy and change the world together. Over at the bath, the new body wash is getting a very thorough review. The guest is obsessed with the scent and how premium the lather feels. It mixes rose and vegetation into a fragrance that stays on the skin, and the dense foam feels like being gently caressed by warm hands, leaving her feeling completely refreshed and squeaky clean from head to toe. Zaipu is struggling to keep these vivid mental images from distracting him. He rushes back to the workshop to focus on something else for a change. Jinlis is already there waiting, relieved to see him finally return to base, and he immediately starts panicking when she notices his suspicious, flustered behavior. But the conversation turns serious once she reveals Shelina's true hidden allegiances. Learning that the second princess is the one pulling the strings changes the stakes. Yvette has always planned to replace her sister and seize the throne for herself. This puts the workshop's proprietary production technology at major risk of being stolen. Zaipu is not panicking yet, since looking at the tech is not the same as understanding it. because he believes knowledge should be shared to create real value anyway. Zaipu is not as worried about spies as he is about someone sabotaging Caroline's work. Meanwhile, Lin is standing over the fields, completely stunned by the transformation. Seeing the cursed land of Emerald Town actually thriving feels like a fever dream. Merida joins her, making it clear that all this growth is thanks to Zaipu's influence, and she pointedly adds that she will not let anyone destroy this newfound hope. This feels like a direct jab at Lin, who did not expect such high praise for the guy. The Fano Chamber of Commerce has been camping out for days just to secure a deal with Caroline, but if they move in officially, the political balance in town shifts completely. The merchant heads off to rest, leaving Lin to ponder what this means for her family's loyalties. Back at the workshop, the resident witch is showing Zaipu how lightning magic can create gas, but she views his otherworld science as just another way to treat witches like consumable batteries. Since only women can use magic, she sees their power as both a gift and a shackle, and then she presents her latest breakthrough, pouring a specific solution into her experimental setup. It's a device that mimics lightning magic without needing a witch, which Zaipu immediately recognizes. He's genuinely impressed she managed to invent a Baghdad battery without any formal scientific training. Agreeing that witches are basically being used as humanoid batteries, he leads her to his own secret stash. This is called the voltaic pile, a stack of zinc and copper plates that provides a much more stable current, and seeing a steady electric current produced without magic completely floors her. The workshop is already buzzing as Zaipu reveals the mountain of other projects he's currently pushing through. With the science lesson finally sinking in, Evelyn is left completely speechless by the sheer scale of the reveal. Zaipu decides to leave her in the capable hands of Jinlis to let everything process while he moves on to the next task. Meanwhile, Merida is already making her own preparations, signaling that she is finally ready to start her operation. Back at the residence, the kid finds himself alone with Riane, noticing she smells a lot more like his specialty body wash than usual. But the mood is a bit heavy as she looks back with a look that says she has something on her mind. Riane suggests that as a summoned beast, it's only right that she provides her master with some kind of reward. And as things start to get a bit cozy, he leans into the moment to show her some appreciation. But the quiet time is cut short when Floro bursts in with a list of complaints about her current workload. The maid is absolutely drained from trying to keep up with Esther's insane list of demands, since fetching bathwater twice a day and serving gourmet meals is starting to take a physical toll. Zaipu realizes the guest's princess syndrome is way worse than he thought, and it's clearly making life miserable for the staff. He tells Floro to stop fetching the morning bathwater for the visitor, making the maid think he's finally showing her some mercy. But his real plan is just to shift that labor over to Riane, proving he's still playing favorites with his household. Over in the guest quarters, Esther is already plotting her next move, convinced that Caroline is nothing without her secret weapon. She's betting on the idea that men are only driven by power and status, and she plans to offer him more than any rival could. And to get the ball rolling, she starts drafting a formal letter to invite him into her sphere of influence. Despite her big plans, she's still miserable in this poor territory, hating that she can't even get a decent soak to relax. The plan is simple: win over the genius engineer and then ditch this backwater hole the very next second. Her subordinates arrive right on cue to confirm that the stage is set for their meeting, and she steps out with total confidence, ready to show Zaipu exactly what he's been missing out on. Esther finally catches up with Riane, but the reception is not what she expected. Riane drops the news that Zaipu is meeting Merida today, and she has clearly read that love letter already. Trying to keep things civil, the princess invites her guest to join her for a bath, and Esther is left wondering what kind of weird fan service plot twist she just walked into. Meanwhile, Zaipu is showing Merida his latest batch of experimental inventory. It turns out he's been moonlighting as a chemist to create high-end body wash by hand. Back in the tub, Riane explains the insane process behind the soap, involving mountain spring water and midnight roses. Even the pump head is a custom piece of engineering designed to turn liquid into dense foam. The retail price is a staggering 3 gold coins per bottle, which sounds like a total scam to the newcomer. Seeing her hesitation, Riane offers a sample to prove the quality is the real deal. Esther decides to give it a shot, curious to see if it lives up to the massive price tag. She starts testing the lather, and the luxury of it hits her immediately. Merida is doing her own field test across town and finds the fragrance surprisingly sophisticated. The texture is perfect, and she realizes this is not just some cheap hobbyist project. She immediately shifts into business mode, asking about the overhead and the monthly production volume. Zaipu reveals the production cost is basically pocket change, and he can pump out 10,000 bottles a month. Merida initially thinks he is chasing a tiny profit margin on a common commodity, and she starts lecturing him on how real business works, thinking he's wasting her time. But the kid just smiles because she's completely miscalculated the math on his pricing. Once he confirms the gold coin price tag, the nearly 40,000% profit margin sends her into a total tailspin. Merida calls the pricing straight-up robbery, arguing that nobody in Azura earns enough to afford it. But across town, Esther is already justifying the cost after experiencing the quality firsthand. Her attendant realizes the trap has already sprung, seeing how easily she was won over. Zaipu explains the concept of market segmentation, focusing exclusively on the ultra-wealthy tier. It is no longer just a commodity, but a luxury status symbol designed for social labeling. The logic of high-end positioning finally starts to click for the seasoned merchant. Zaipu pushes the strategy further with plans for artificial scarcity and a restricted membership system. Merida is floored by the realization that soap can be marketed as an exclusive privilege, but she points out that high society is a closed circle that Riene cannot easily penetrate. The kid just smirks, clearly having anticipated the need for a social wedge. He claims to already have a breakthrough point ready to crack the elite market wide open. Esther reflects on how the entire bathing invitation was a calculated setup to get her hooked. She tries to maintain her guard, vowing not to fall for such an obvious promotional trap. That resolve evaporates the moment she sees the custom luxury gift set he prepared for her. The bribe works perfectly, and she decides to accept his hospitality without further complaints. But the sheer effectiveness of his methods makes her realize how dangerous he is as an enemy. Merida admits the strategy is viable as long as he can prove the sales channels exist. She offers to lend him the necessary funds to prepare for the upcoming spring cabinet meeting. The deal is officially struck, securing the financial backing needed to launch the brand. Merida watches him leave, realizing his business acumen is enough to completely disrupt the world's economy. Merida realizes she either makes this guy her partner or faces him as a terrifying rival. He is the type to fight over ore resources in ways no one else understands, making him a dangerous wildcard. Back at the house, Zaipu is feeling pretty smug about locking in the funding in Esther's favor. Daydreaming about Riene has him in a great mood until a sudden interruption ruins the vibe. Riene just pops in without warning, catching him completely off guard in bed. He tries to lay down some ground rules about privacy and knocking, but she is too focused on the workshop. It turns out Caroline is still working late, and the results of her latest experiment are groundbreaking. She's managed to build a voltaic battery that actually replicates the effects of lightning magic. This prototype is stronger than any tool she's made before, even if it cannot match a top-tier mage yet. Caroline starts theorizing about what would happen if she could combine this tech with magic stone energy. The term catches Zaipu's attention, prompting him to ask for a breakdown of how those stones work. Riene explains that these crystals are essentially residue from high-tier witches that retain power for years. They act as a direct fuel source for magic tools, providing the juice needed for high-level output. Low-tier witches even spend their days manually charging these stones to keep the magical economy moving. Bro realizes the whole system is just a bunch of human power banks charging up rechargeable batteries. Since Caroline does not have any stones or the talent to charge them, her development has hit a wall. Zaipu just brushes the problem off, telling them to forget about magic stones entirely. He wants to use science to lift the burden of magic from witches and change how the world functions. His plan is to bypass the magic stone monopoly by finding and mining natural ore resources instead. The girls are totally lost, having no idea how basic rocks are supposed to replace the world's primary energy source. Over at Yvette's mansion, she's not interested in the politics of the ancient war, focusing entirely on the massive hoard of magic stones buried at the battlefield ruins. The news of these resources spread like wildfire, especially since people used to think the stories about the war were just myths. Now everyone is scrambling to claim a piece of that power for themselves. Meanwhile, Zaipu explains that while ores aren't plug-and-play like magic stones, they're actually the greatest treasure on the planet if you have the right tech. He envisions a future where these rocks light up every street corner, allowing people to communicate across the globe at any time. In his mind, science can turn even the wildest dreams into a tangible reality. Caroline is not quite sold on the pitch yet, so the boss decides it's time for a hands-on demonstration. He fires up his makeshift lab equipment to prove his point, ignoring the confusion as he pieces together a new invention. The goal is to use science to finally drive back the darkness. Handing Caroline a wire coil and telling her to hold on tight, she has no idea what he's trying to accomplish until the filament inside the glass starts to glow with a steady warmth. This tech basically replicates the expensive magic lamps only nobles can afford, but Zaipu plans to use ores to bring this power to everyone and end the era of magic. Zaipu finally moves on the plan to investigate the local ore reserves, asking Shailina to lead the exploration using his new scientific methods. She's caught off guard by the request since they have only met twice, questioning why he would hand such a critical task to a virtual stranger. His logic is simple: anyone dedicated to finding the truth earns his immediate trust. Riene doubles down on that sentiment, following his lead without any hesitation. This level of transparency is unheard of compared to magic masters who guard secrets, but the moment is cut short by an incoming message from Lady Yvette. Yvette wants a status update on the progress being made in Emerald Town. The call leaves Shailina visibly torn between her old loyalties and this new mission. Back at the estate, the daily routine is falling apart without any bathwater. Word spreads quickly through the staff that a major strike has just begun. Rumors suggest that Floro is the one leading the protest against the boss. The workers claim she's tired of watching Zaipu and Riene show off their affection. And they've decided that no amount of pay is worth the mental tax. They would rather stop working than continue being forced to witness the romance. This walkout leaves the remaining management buried under an even heavier workload. One of the staff finally tracks Floro down to try and end the standoff. She tries to persuade her to return, but the strike is officially in full effect. Floro insists she would rather waste her labor than endure one more shift. Floro starts her manipulation by empathizing with Jinlies over their shared status as struggling workers. She badmouths Lady Esther, painting her as a lazy aristocrat with zero ambition beyond her inheritance. The two exchange horror stories about physical exhaustion and the ridiculous demands of their respective jobs. Jinlies admits she is reaching a breaking point because her workload doubled without any extra pay, which is the exact opening Floro needs to start her recruitment pitch. She leans into the big sister role to make herself seem like a trustworthy ally. While Jinlies' life sounds like a nightmare, Floro claims her own situation is even more insulting. She puts on a show of being desperate to escape the horror of her current employment. The catch is that her struggle involves Lady Riene forcing her to take double overtime pay. She complains that the work environment is so relaxed they have spent days literally counting ants. This reverse psychology works perfectly, making Jinlies beg for a way into this sea of bitterness. The poor girl is so desperate for a better gig that she completely misses the flex. She officially asks for an internal referral to join the crew at the estate. Back with the boss, Floro reports that Esther is only sucking up to the princess to avoid a beating. She finishes her debriefing with a proud attitude, thinking she has handled the infiltration perfectly. The girl even claims she's the most capable person on the payroll, bar none. Zaipu is not exactly impressed since he sent her to gather intel, not to start drama. He scolds her for wasting time on personal side quests, but she just brushes it off. The focus shifts back to the mining mission as Shelina steps forward with her first major contribution. She spent the night drafting a complete manual on identifying and safely handling various rare ores. Zaipu hands over the manual, officially making it a gift for Shelina. She reminds him that she never actually agreed to join his side after their last talk. He shrugs it off, admitting he planned to give her the research regardless of her final choice. She immediately pushes back, accusing him of trying to buy her loyalty with rare info. But he clarifies that knowledge is not a weapon to be bartered, it belongs to the curious. And insists that anyone seeking the truth deserves to have the resources to find it. The logic hits home, leaving her to rethink her stance on his offer while he walks away. Meanwhile, Merida presents Riene with the Dagger of Broken Packs, a legendary item for cutting ties. This artifact is the real reason she traveled to Emerald Town in the first place. Using it would officially dissolve the contract, keeping Zaipu bound as a summoned beast. Seeing the opportunity to change their dynamic, Riene prepares to ask for a massive favor. It is a heavy play that could change the power balance of their entire relationship. To sweeten the deal, she offers a massive bag of funds to help solve Merida's family crisis. Riene admits her feelings for the man have become impossible to ignore, raising the stakes. Merida hears her out but immediately shuts down the request for a formal trade. She suggests that Riene should take her shot and ask the man himself rather than using a proxy. Riene is terrified of a direct rejection, fearing the bond they have might break for good, and falls into a long silence while weighing the risk of being honest with him. Merida tells her to just treat the dagger as a gift and decide for herself when the time is right. Before they can finish the talk, an emergency transmission cuts through the room. Ruby bursts in through an emergency magic transmission, demanding a status update on how far Riene has actually gotten with Zaipu. The questions get incredibly personal, moving from hand-holding to whether they have already spent the night together. Riene is baffled that her friend would burn through high-level emergency magic just to gossip about her love life. But the real warning is about the Dagger of Broken Packs that Merida is currently carrying. Ruby is dead serious about making sure that specific artifact never ends up in Zaipu's hands. She claims every other woman in town is already using every trick in the book to buy his affection. According to the rumors, Esther is trying to lure him in with bathing invitations and expensive gifts. Even Floro is supposedly sneaking around to warm his bed and studying manuals on how to land a man. It's all news to Riene, who has not seen any of this supposed seduction happening around the house. Ruby argues that she is only oblivious because she is the one being targeted as the main competition. The advice is simple: if she does not hide that dagger and keep him bound as a summoned beast, someone else will swoop in. Faced with the idea of losing him forever, Riene starts to reconsider her original plan to free him. She decides to stash the dagger away for now and finally take some initiative before it is too late. Meanwhile, over at Merida's temporary residence, the merchant is banking on Riene accidentally revealing the hidden dagger to create a rift between the two. If Zaipu finds out Riene is hiding his freedom, he will hold a grudge, leaving him vulnerable to a new offer. An assistant arrives with a stack of new documents for her review, which turn out to be invitations for an upcoming tasting event she is organizing. Merida starts planning to move the event to Caroline, looking for the perfect stage to execute her next move. Zaipu likes the idea of the tasting event but wants to give it a very specific target audience. He plans to distribute invitations to high-ranking witches and nobles under the Fano Chamber's name, offering Merida a 10% cut of the profits to make it worth her while. Merida is floored by his business sense, noting how he's using vanity and samples to hook the elite. This leads her to suggest a private partnership that cuts out the middlemen. essentially proposing they work together outside the influence of the Land family. She points out that while the Fano name has weight, it isn't truly hers to control, and warns him that everything he builds for Riene will technically belong to the Caroline family. The question of his freedom comes up again as she asks if he's thought about a way out of his contract. Since he's silent, she tells him to take his time, though she's dead serious about the marriage offer. Zaipu is starting to realize that people in this world have zero chill when it comes to wedding bells. He promises to think about it just to get out of the room and heads back to the territory. Once he's back home, the gears in his head start turning about his own financial future. Even though he's wary of her tactics, Merida's pitch about having his own business is starting to sound pretty good. He begins daydreaming about being so rich he can just buy his way to the top of the leaderboards. But his fantasy is cut short when a messenger tracks him down with a formal invitation. It's from Riene, who wants him to join her for a private dinner tonight. The instructions are weirdly specific about him being exactly on time and not a second early. Little does he know, Riene has taken Ruby's advice to heart and is going all in on the seduction. She's set the stage with roses and a new outfit, waiting for the one thing left to complete the plan. Riene is sticking to the plan as she waits for her dinner guest to arrive. Meanwhile, Zaipu is staring at the pink envelope, wondering why they need formal mail when they live in the same house, and since he can't guess what she's thinking, he decides to focus on his slimes instead. Realizing he has a technical problem that requires a specific set of skills, he tracks down Shelina in her workshop to pitch a new idea. She is not exactly thrilled to be interrupted. So she cuts straight to the point and asks what he wants this time. With winter right around the corner and the temperature dropping, the kid wants to pivot from soil purification to building a greenhouse. He explains that relying on witches to manage the weather is way too expensive and exhausting for the team, but a controlled, transparent environment would keep the heat in and the frost out. It would basically automate the whole process and let the witches focus on actual magic instead of manual labor. The only missing piece is a durable, transparent material to wrap the structure in, and he thinks a refined slime membrane is the perfect solution. Shelina is having none of it, telling him to get lost because she's not interested in a joint project. While the rejection is pretty firm, he does not try to push the issue any further. He takes the no in stride and accepts the situation, letting her know he will be working on the separation method himself if she changes her mind. As he heads out to prepare for his dinner date, Shelina is left alone with the bottle, and the gears are already starting to turn. Zaipu sprints over to Riene's place after almost losing track of time with his slime research. He catches up to her just as she's heading inside with a fresh basket of groceries. The kid realizes she did not just invite him for a chat but actually planned to cook for him personally. Riene starts getting into her cooking gear while Ruby's voice echoes in her head about domestic skills. The plan is simple. If she starts the job, Zaipu will not be able to stop himself from volunteering. Stepping in, he tries to take over the kitchen duties right away and insists she should just relax while he handles the heavy lifting. Ruby is convinced this kind of pampering is the fastest way to any guy's heart. They settle into the room, but the atmosphere is a little different than Riene expected. Since his offer to help did not stick, he suggests heading back to the lab until dinner is served. This definitely was not part of the romantic script Ruby laid out for her. Riene grabs his hand to stop him from leaving her alone in the kitchen, promising to have everything ready in record time if he just stays put. One look at her is enough to make him realize there is absolutely no saying no to this. His thoughts start running wild as he realizes he feels exactly like a husband waiting for his wife. While she preps the ingredients, the domestic vibe starts getting to both of them. Riene realizes it's time to move on to the next phase of Ruby's master plan. The goal is to use a simple apron as an excuse to close the distance between them. She plays it off as a struggle and asks him to help her tie the strings, and he leans in to fix the bow, leaving them both flustered as the tension peaks. Zaipu takes the bait and starts tying the apron, but he's way too focused on the task. Instead of a romantic touch, he treats this like a high-stakes engineering project. The guy starts bragging about knowing 36 different knotting techniques, boasting about his professional video tutorials on the subject like it's a major flex. Riene can only offer a weak thanks while realizing her romantic plan just tanked. Dinner is finally served, but she's already tallying up 2 major failures in a row. Ruby's next piece of advice flashes through her mind about pouring the wine, and Riene tries to bridge the gap by leaning in close with the bottle. The goal is to praise him and move in for a kiss when the mood hits, but her nerves are completely shot as she prepares for her final move. Clutching the bottle like her life depends on it, she tries to find her voice. From Zaipu's perspective, her intense energy feels less romantic and more homicidal. Riene leans in and whispers his nickname to finally set the stage. The compliment finally begins, though her hands are shaking too hard to keep the bottle steady. This attempt at romance turns into a disaster when she misses the glass entirely. Red wine pours onto the table as he tries to warn her about the mess. It lands right on his lap, causing him to jump up in a complete panic. Desperate to fix the mess, she grabs a cloth and reaches right for his pants. Zaipu barely manages to block her before she makes things 10 times more awkward, leaving her totally confused about why she is not allowed to help him clean up. Zaipu heads off to wash up and escape the awkwardness, while a mysterious girl named Shelina watches from the woods, looking like she is planning something major for her sister's sake. This new player seems ready to do whatever it takes to succeed. Back in the dining room, Renee is drowning in self-pity, counting every single way her romantic plan went up in smoke. Meanwhile, Zaipu is soaking in the bath and trying to decode her behavior. Renee is literally curled up on the floor, convinced she's ruined everything. Our hero reviews the facts from the formal invite to the personal cooking. The defeat is so heavy that Renee actually considers throwing in the towel. But despite the chaos, Zaipu cannot help but think she is adorable. A sudden knock at the bathroom door breaks his train of thought, and he realizes she wants to come in while he is still in the tub. His brain immediately jumps to a shared bath scenario before his morals kick in. But he quickly decides that playing hard to get is not really his style. The man flexes and gives her the green light to enter for a talk. Renee walks in holding a box containing the dagger of broken packs, which apparently has the power to dissolve their contract immediately. Zaipu is blindsided by the news that their deal might be over so fast, and the shock is only topped by Renee realizing she just walked in on a naked guy. Renee manages an apology while trying not to stare at her naked host, then formally introduces herself and reveals that today is her 18th birthday. Zaipu offers a quick happy birthday, though he suspects something deeper is coming. This girl starts listing her assets, from her witch certificate to her castle keys, making the whole thing feel more like a high-stakes matchmaking session than a chat. Renee promises to share everything she owns and provide him with a good life. This witch goes full ride or die, promising to protect him and raise their children together. The sheer intensity of her life plan leaves the guy completely speechless for once. He finally puts the pieces together and realizes this is actually a marriage proposal. A tiny nod from her confirms he did not misinterpret the list of demands. Our hero asks the obvious question of why she is doing this so suddenly. The confession is simple: she likes him more than the rest of the world. Renee clarifies that he still has the legal right to turn her down, but Zaipu finds her clumsy honesty way too heartwarming to let her keep rambling. He explains that the guy is usually the one who initiates the dating process. Taking charge of the situation, he pulls her close to bridge the physical gap. The tension peaks as he prepares to make his romantic intentions crystal clear. Finally, he asks her to officially be his girlfriend and stay by his side. Renee is totally lost because she does not actually know what a girlfriend is, and the concept of dating is so foreign she thinks she has just been engaged. Zaipu is shocked to find out that people in this world just skip right to the wedding. Renee explains that in Merida, a proposal usually means you are locked in for life. He has to break down the concept of dating as a trial run to see if they are actually compatible. This dating-first idea is basically a foreign language to her, but she's trying to follow along. Zaipu clarifies that the whole point is having the freedom to walk away if things do not work out. Renee seems to be struggling with the idea of a relationship that is not an immediate legal contract. Just as they are finally getting back into a romantic rhythm and closing the distance, a sudden interruption ruins the mood and forces them back to reality. The guard insists they need to head out to the fields to check on a developing situation. Once they arrive, Renee picks up a strange, sweet fragrance lingering in the air. Zaipu spots a weird sticky liquid coating the ground and the crops. He realizes someone has tampered with the soil, but he cannot tell what the fluid is yet. The assistant notes the smell is way too cloying to be natural, and she identifies it as a powerful attractant designed to lure in pests. A massive buzzing sound starts coming from the horizon as something approaches at high speed. It is a swarm of heart-boring locusts, and they are diving straight for the baited field. The sheer volume of insects is enough to wipe out the entire harvest in seconds. Renee does not hesitate and summons a massive wave of flame to intercept the swarm. She turns the sky into a literal furnace to keep the pests from touching the ground. The workers breathe a sigh of relief knowing their lady is strong enough to handle a literal plague. The situation gets worse as a second, even larger wave of locusts appears in the sky. Renee takes charge, organizing the fire witches into a front line while the others provide support. A wall of flames erupts as the team tries to incinerate the swarm before it touches the crops. Despite the heat, some of the pests manage to dive through the gaps in the defense. The sheer numbers are starting to overwhelm them, and the witches are already hitting their limit. Zaipu pulls out a magnifying glass and realizes these are not standard locusts, they are a soft-shelled variant. This means they need a different approach, so the team calls out for Shelina's specific expertise. Lightning magic is the only thing that can clear the field fast enough to save the harvest. While the battle rages, Zaipu cannot stop thinking about how convenient this sudden infestation actually is. His eyes land on a suspicious woman nearby who seems a little too calm for the chaos. A quick memory flash confirms she's the same person he saw lurking around earlier that night. Before he can move, the suspect accidentally bumps right into Shelina mid-cast. Shelina hits the dirt, only to realize the ground beneath her is freshly coated in that sticky attractant. The locusts pivot instantly, ignoring the crops to dive-bomb the fallen lightning mage instead. It's a targeted hit, and Shelina is pinned down by a literal mountain of hungry insects. The crowd calls for help as the saboteur watches her trap work perfectly from the sidelines. A massive bolt of lightning suddenly clears the area, blasting the swarm back in a single surge. Shelina manages to pull herself up, shaken but alive after the narrow escape. Zaipu locks eyes with the culprit, knowing exactly who is behind the entire mess now. The problem is that magic is finite and they're going to be defenseless once the witches run dry. Zaipu realizes that since these bugs are still biological, they have a major weakness he can exploit. If the poison is not working, he'll just pivot to making massive sticky traps out of the local supplies. He rallies the men to grab every drop of tung oil and honey they can find, sending the entire group on a frantic scavenger hunt while the swarm keeps closing in. Zaipu grabs a helper and heads for the workshop to start the next phase of the plan. Meanwhile, the saboteur is lurking in the shadows, finally securing whatever item she was after. She's convinced that once this is over, her target will have no choice but to serve Lady Yvette. Out in the fields, the defensive line is breaking as the fire mages reach their absolute limit. Just as one of the exhausted mages collapses, Shelina catches her before she hits the dirt, realizing they cannot hold this perimeter much longer without backup. She puts her faith in the kid, knowing he's busy cooking up some kind of scientific countermeasure, and begs everyone to hold the line for just a few more minutes. Back at the lab, the helper is confused why she's being asked to boil sticky resin and burn seashells. Zaipu explains that high-heat calcination will turn the calcium carbonate in the shells into quicklime, creating an alkaline substance that'll dehydrate the locusts and sterilize their eggs in the soil. The science is way over her head, so she just focuses on keeping the fire hot while the crowd gathers more materials. It might cause a bit of collateral damage to the plants, but it is the only way to save the seedlings. Suddenly, the workshop doors are kicked wide open, and Zaipu comes face to face with a stranger who definitely does not belong in Emerald Town. These three knights show up demanding Zaipu come with them, making it clear they're distancing themselves from Shelina's mess. But the kid sees right through the princess's political play, realizing the plague was staged to frame rivals and destroy achievements. He even gives her credit for the move before the lead knight cuts him off. Asking if he's going to cooperate or make this difficult, they expect him to surrender and come along without a scene. Knowing he can't win a direct fight against these pros, he agrees to go with them on one condition. The townsfolk have to be allowed to take the supplies to the fields, and even though the workers do not want to abandon him, he reminds them that saving the town is the real priority. Plus, he's confident Riene can track him down through their contract. The knights are not interested in playing nice or helping civilians, but Zaipu knows his own value is his best leverage. He warns that if he resists, the mission is a bust and they will have a ninth-tier witch coming for their heads. Seeing the risk of fighting both him and Riene at once, the group finally caves and lets the workers clear out with the gear. With the town safe for now, he just has to hope his message reaches the right person. One of the captors mocks the success of his negotiation, revealing that they've already accounted for his trump card. Zaipu recognizes the legendary Dagger of Broken Pacts, a terrifying artifact specifically designed to nullify absolute magical bonds. She moves to eliminate any chance of Riene interfering, lunging forward to strike while he's still processing the trap. This is not just about a master-servant contract anymore, it is a direct assault on the genuine connection they've built. The magical blade sinks in as the woman apologizes for the necessity, and the physical shock of the severing sends him crashing to the floor. The feedback loop hits Riene like a freight train, leaving the ninth-tier witch reeling from the agony of the broken link. With their bond shattered, both are left completely vulnerable and unable to reach each other.